kasih untuk moderator dan juga narasumber yang sudah hadir dan akan berbagi hari ini. Jadi webinar hari ini yang memang yang berjudul Keadilan Gender dan Hak Rakyat Pesisir, ini adalah rangkaian dari kegiatan kami, di mana hari ini kami memang sengaja mengangkat tema keadilan gender karena sesungguhnya di dalam setiap persoalan ataupun di dalam setiap aspek yang kita diskusikan terkait situasi yang dihadapi oleh nelayan maupun juga masyarakat pesisir hari ini, baik itu bicara soal penggusuran karena program kota yang meminggirkan masyarakat yang dianggap untuk penataan kota, ataupun juga bicara soal infrastruktur atau investasi skala besar, maupun juga persoalan-persoalan lainnya yang terjadi dan dialami oleh masyarakat pesisir, itu sesungguhnya selalu memiliki aspek atau dimensi gender. Penelitian Solidaritas Perempuan misalnya pernah meneliti bahwa rata-rata perempuan pesisir itu jam kerjanya 16 jam. Ada yang lebih tentunya, tapi rata-rata dari hasil penelitian kami demikian. Itu baru bicara soal beban berlapis yang dihadapi oleh perempuan pesisir. Belum lagi kita juga bicara bagaimana perempuan-perempuan ini tidak hanya berhadapan dengan tadi ya proyek infrastruktur, penggusuran dan lain sebagainya, tapi juga berhadapan dengan diskriminasi atau juga marginalisasi yang itu juga menyebabkan mereka tidak dilibatkan dalam ruang-ruang pengambilan keputusan. Belum lagi kebijakan-kebijakan yang ada juga belum secara spesifik memuat atau mengakui peran perempuan nelayan maupun pembudidaya ikan dan petambak garam, sehingga hak dari perempuan nelayan itu juga rentan untuk tidak bisa dicapai. Ada banyak persoalan, tapi saya tidak akan bicara banyak di sini, karena nanti akan ada beberapa narasumber, ada 4 narasumber yang akan mengungkapkan bukan hanya dari Indonesia, tapi juga di beberapa negara lainnya, termasuk secara internasional, yang nanti akan diperkenalkan oleh moderator. Dan kegiatan kali ini sebenarnya adalah rangkaian dari Rembuk Rakyat Pesisir, yang diselenggarakan dimulai di tanggal 10 September kemarin, ini yang kedua, dan yang ketiga nanti minggu depan juga akan diselenggarakan pada tanggal 23 September. Jadi Rembuk Rakyat Pesisir ini sendiri sebenarnya punya beberapa tujuan gitu ya. Pertama, bagaimana memperkuat nelayan, makanya kemudian kami di sini juga melibatkan teman-teman perempuan nelayan dari Makassar, dari Kendari, dan juga sebetulnya dari Lampung yang sedang berusaha untuk bisa masuk gitu ya, karena situasinya mati lampu. Terus kemudian juga mengundang beberapa pihak maupun juga jaringan yang ada di sini. Harapannya pengetahuan dan juga kapasitas yang dibagikan oleh para narasumber maupun peserta yang bisa interaktif itu bisa memperkuat kesadaran maupun juga pemahaman perempuan nelayan dan juga teman-teman yang hadir di sini sama-sama memperjuangkan situasi nelayan, baik itu perempuan maupun laki-laki, untuk bisa menjadi lebih baik ke depan. Selain itu, tujuan dari Rembuk Rakyat Pesisir itu juga bagaimana membangun jaringan, jadi teman-teman juga saling bertemu di sini sesama nelayan, ataupun juga bersama masyarakat sipil lainnya, teman-teman aktivis, tidak hanya di Indonesia, tapi juga di wilayah lainnya. Ada hari ini juga kita kehadiran Mbak Ati ya, jurnalis gitu. Jadi mungkin jadi mudah-mudahan ini juga bisa membangun jejaring untuk terus menyuarakan dan memperjuangkan situasi nelayan di Indonesia maupun di berbagai belahan dunia lainnya, dan tentunya juga penting untuk mengabarkan kepada publik bagaimana situasi masyarakat pesisir hari ini, sehingga publik juga bisa mendukung perjuangan, karena kita tidak boleh lupa bahwa apa yang bisa kita makan ataupun juga gizi yang kita dapatkan juga banyak sebenarnya dari laut, dan peran nelayan tradisional itu sangat signifikan dalam kehidupan kita. Kalau di webinar sebelumnya kita banyak bicara soal COVID, teman-teman sudah bicara tidak hanya bagaimana dampak COVID terhadap nelayan tradisional, tapi juga bicara bagaimana selama ini nelayan tradisional atau perikanan skala kecil itu sudah berkontribusi terhadap kebutuhan pangan dunia, termasuk pada saat pandemik. Maka hari ini seperti yang tadi sudah diungkapkan, kita akan bicara banyak aspek gendernya, dan nanti di tanggal 23 September kita juga akan bicara soal bagaimana mega infrastruktur atau infrastruktur raksasa, investasi, itu bisa mempengaruhi situasi nelayan, termasuk juga mempengaruhi situasi demokrasi yang dibangun oleh negara-negara seperti Indonesia, Filipina, dan lain sebagainya, yang itu juga ternyata terpengaruh karena mereka menggunakan bagaimana menguatnya otoritarianisme di beberapa negara yang itu juga digunakan oleh investasi infrastruktur skala besar dan lain sebagainya, itu juga menjadikan apa yang dialami oleh masyarakat pesisir menjadi berlapis-lapis. Jadi harapannya teman-teman yang hadir hari ini itu juga bisa hadir di webinar yang mendatang. Mungkin itu untuk membuka di awal, saya akan serahkan kepada moderator kita, Andi Cipta Asmawati. Dia adalah salah satu sahabat SP sebenarnya, karena juga lama bergelut dan juga berinteraksi bersama Solidaritas Perempuan. Saat ini dia ada di APWLD, nanti bisa dijelaskan sendiri ya Kak Andi ya. Jadi selamat mendengarkan dan juga berbagi teman-teman. Harapan ini juga bisa menjadi ruang kita bersama untuk terus menyuarakan dan juga memperkuat gerakan nelayan dan gerakan masyarakat pesisir. Terima kasih, silakan Kak Andi.
Terima kasih, Caca. Yeah, so I'm sorry if I want to speak in English. So I want to make sure that all the participants already using the translation service there. Yeah. Okay. Hi everyone, thank you very much for joining us today. Welcome to Coastal People Assembly, or in Bahasa we call it as our Rembuk Rakyat Pesisir. My name is Andi. I'm a labor program officer of Asia Pacific Forum on Women, Law and Development. We call it as our FAWD. And I'm sitting and speaking from Bogor, Indonesia. I will be your guide in the second session with the topic Gender Justice and Human Rights of the coastal people for 3 hours. So it's very honored to see you from different places together, especially in during this situation. Yeah, and I would speak in English. Yeah, but if my English running slow, because we were taking the discussion for 3 hours, so maybe like automatically I will change to Indonesia. I'm so delighted and eager to be involved in this exciting topic, because to my understanding, for women in fisheries, there is growing recognition that women are active not only in the post-harvesting activities, but also in harvesting fish. Women are seen to fish. With fishing now, the major income source of the household, women are going to fish, and then they're using a boat. Some women also fishing by themselves. However, there is also still a strong perception that women are not suiting for the fishing, and then the patriarchy mindset still there. Most women involved in fishing lack access to tools and credit, a voice in decision making, and opportunities to receive training still lack for women. And then women also have less time available to adjust to take advantage of growing opportunities. Also, women's time is less flexible because of their reproductive responsibility. So they also have a burden for unpaid care work for their family. So compared to women access to resource and decision making, it's also less. Um, and women's access to training, credit, and other production resources exist in women's participation in fisheries. So women's time constraint and their decision-making power in household indicates that household is not a single unit where all the members share the same needs and benefit equally. So women experience injustice. But of course, so many dimensions of discrimination against women that we can hear from this discussion. Today, we have 4 panelists who will share their experience and expertise, will enrich and deepen the topic. So we are pleased to welcome Mariska Kurniawati. She is a program coordinator of Solidaritas Perempuan, or Women's Solidarity for Human Rights. She will share the situation of women coastal and women fishers in Indonesia, along with the discriminatory policies and practices they experience. And then we will have Aisat Luisa. from a self-managed campaign presenting her work on how the tourism context in the Maldives and the situation affecting women coastal in relation with the protection of women's human rights. And then we will have Zoe Brand, the Agrarian and Environment Justice team from Transnational Institute. She will be presenting the role of women in the movement to fight the rights of fisher folks and coastal communities at the global level. Lastly, we will have Yvang Tan. She is the case coordinator from FIAN International. She will explain the rights of fisher folks, including the rights of women fishers as a food producers, and how international human rights instruments guarantee to protect women in fisher folks for enjoying their rights. So they will all share their critical insights. Each of them has 15 minutes or max 20 minutes. And we also expect that all of the speakers can be like speaking slowly. So the translation will be, translation process will be easy. So yeah, let's start. Ari, you will explain us about the discrimination that women in coastal communities and fisheries experience. And then I think that this inclusive decision-making process also determines gender justice. And you, as a women's rights activist, can tell us much more about that. Ari, if you unmute your voice and share your slides, you can take it away. I'm passing you the presenter form.
Thank you so much, Andy, and I am also welcoming all of the participants today, especially fisherwomen and also coastal women from SP Animamiri and SP Kendari. Due of that situation, then I will be speaking bahasa Indonesia. Halo teman-teman yang di Makassar dan yang di Kendari. Jadi apa yang akan saya sampaikan siang hari ini sebetulnya adalah situasi, cerita maupun pengalaman yang dihadapi oleh kawan-kawan di komunitas SP, khususnya di Makassar, di Kendari, di Lampung, dan kemudian di Jakarta, serta beberapa wilayah lainnya di Indonesia. Saya bisa minta tolong ditampilkan presentasinya. Gimana teman-teman panitia? Oke. Ya. Oke, seperti yang sudah disampaikan oleh Andi tadi bahwa sebagai pengantar diskusi kita siang ini saya akan menyampaikan bagaimana keadilan gender maupun hak masyarakat pesisir di Indonesia. Next, ini sekilas tentang SP. SP adalah organisasi feminis yang didirikan sejak tahun 1990 dan kebetulan siang hari ini kita juga kedatangan salah satu pendirinya, ada Mbak Ati Nurbaiti. Dengan keanggotaan individu, kami bekerja bersama dengan perempuan petani, perempuan nelayan, perempuan miskin kota, perempuan buruh migran dan keluarganya, perempuan yang hidup di lingkungan dengan penerapan hukum diskriminatif, dan perempuan marginal lainnya untuk membangun gerakan politik feminis dalam merebut kembali kedaulatan perempuan. Next. Ya, ini beberapa strategi yang selama ini dilakukan oleh SP. Sekolah Kepemimpinan Feminis, kami juga melakukan Feminist Participatory Action Research untuk beberapa isu, salah satunya adalah isu pesisir dan keadilan gender di sektor perikanan. Kemudian kami juga melakukan pengorganisasian perempuan akar rumput, advokasi kebijakan dan monitoring proyek, serta melakukan advokasi ataupun penanganan kasus dan kampanye publik. Baik, kalau kita bicara soal bagaimana perempuan dan pesisir, kita akan melihat bahwa bagaimana perempuan itu sangat lekat dengan wilayah pesisir, khususnya di Indonesia, di mana ada semacam pembagian peran bahwa wilayah kelola perempuan itu memang wilayah sebagian besar wilayah pesisir. Walaupun tidak bisa dipungkiri ada juga perempuan yang pergi ke tengah laut begitu, tapi memang sebagian besar wilayah kelola perempuan itu adalah wilayah pesisir. Sehingga ketika wilayah pesisir yang kemudian menjadi target dari malpraktek pembangunan, maka perempuanlah yang kemudian akan merasakan dampaknya lebih dulu begitu. Kita juga lihat bagaimana perempuan bagaimana perempuan dengan peran gendernya, dalam artian kita melihat bahwa perempuan dengan peran perawatan maupun peran menjaga keluarganya gitu itu sangat memiliki kelekatan dengan alam, sehingga ketika terjadi kerusakan di alam maka perempuan menjadi terdepan dalam merawat dan menjaga lingkungan. Jika satu ekosistem rusak begitu, maka perempuan juga yang akan lebih dulu merasakan dampak dari kerusakannya tersebut. Misalnya kita bicara soal penambangan pesisir di Kodingareng, teman-teman Makassar juga hadir di sini. Bagaimana kemudian perempuan yang paling depan gitu, karena memang kita merasakan dampaknya lebih berat dan lebih mendalam gitu daripada yang dirasakan oleh kelompok masyarakat lainnya. Jadi bagaimana karakteristik perempuan dan pola relasi yang dibangun antara perempuan dengan alam itu membuat perempuan punya pengetahuan dan pengalaman yang khas dibandingkan dengan kelompok masyarakat lainnya. Bisa berikutnya. Ya, SP di tahun 2019 menggunakan strategi Feminist Participatory Action Research, jadi riset aksi partisipatif yang menggunakan perspektif feminis. Bagi SP, FPAR itu bukan sekedar, jadi riset ini dimaksudkan untuk merekam, mendokumentasikan bagaimana situasi perempuan, bagaimana pengalaman perempuan dalam berhadapan dengan berbagai macam proyek pembangunan yang menyasar wilayah pesisir. Di antaranya adalah reklamasi pesisir di Kendari, di Makassar, kemudian di Jakarta, dan juga di Lampung. Bagi SP, FPAR sendiri itu bukan sekedar sebuah aktivitas penelitian, tapi ini adalah sebuah pilihan politik yang diawali oleh keyakinan bahwa pengetahuan, data, maupun keahlian itu punya dimensi gender. Yang sebenarnya itu adalah privilege atau keistimewaan kewenangan yang dimiliki oleh perempuan di akar rumput. Sehingga perempuan juga bisa mendorong perubahan kebijakan dari dokumentasi ataupun dari pengetahuan yang berhasil dikumpulkan dari proses FPAR. Nah, metode FPAR yang digunakan oleh SP itu sangat membantu SP dalam mencapai tujuan kami, bagaimana membangun gerakan feminis dan juga bagaimana mencapai pemenuhan terhadap hak-hak perempuan. Nah, dari proses FPAR yang kami lakukan, kita bisa mendapatkan berbagai macam strategi kolaborasi gitu, bagaimana memunculkan kekuatan yang ada di dalam diri perempuan secara kolektif untuk bisa menyuarakan apa yang kemudian menjadi desakan dan tuntutan perempuan kepada pihak-pihak yang berwenang ataupun berkepentingan. Berikutnya. Dari proses FPAR ini sebetulnya kami merekam beberapa situasi ketidakadilan yang dialami oleh perempuan pesisir. Yang pertama adalah tidak diakui identitas politik sebagai perempuan nelayan. Jadi kita lihat bagaimana sebagai contoh, bagaimana di Undang-Undang Nomor 7 tahun 2016 tentang perlindungan dan pemberdayaan nelayan, pembudidaya ikan, maupun petambak garam, kata perempuan disebutkan hanya sebagai bagian dari rumah tangga nelayan. Artinya, perempuan hanya diakui sebagai bagian dari keluarga nelayan. Hal ini tentu menjadi sangat problematis karena SP sendiri menemui fakta bahwa ketika perempuan di satu keluarga adalah seorang nelayan, sementara suaminya itu adalah seorang penarik beca, keluarganya kemudian tidak diakui sebagai keluarga nelayan. implikasinya adalah ketika pemerintah memberikan program bantuan kapal, gitu, mendistribusikan kapal untuk keluarga nelayan di Makassar, maka keluarga ini tidak mendapatkan akses terhadap program tersebut karena memang keluarga tersebut tidak diidentifikasi sebagai keluarga nelayan. Itu salah satu contoh. Nah, ketika tidak diakui, maka kemudian perempuan juga tidak menjadi subjek, tidak menjadi pelaku, atau bahkan tidak didengarkan atau diperhitungkan situasinya dalam proses perencanaan maupun dalam proses pengawasan ataupun proses evaluasi pembangunan. Jadi kalau kita melihat bagaimana negara di Indonesia ini hanya melihat masyarakat sebagai kelompok yang homogen. Jadi situasi perempuan tidak diperhitungkan. Padahal kita lihat masyarakat itu masih sangat lekat dengan budaya patriarkis. Ini salah satu temuan kami dari 4 proyek reklamasi yang dilakukan di keempat wilayah. Begitu proses konsultasi publik yang dilakukan, meskipun itu juga masih sangat formalitas begitu, tapi tidak pernah ada upaya khusus untuk melibatkan perempuan dalam proses konsultasi publik yang dilakukan. Jadi prosesnya pun dilakukan biasanya di malam hari, gitu, di mana memang bagi perempuan itu juga sangat sulit untuk terlibat. Kemudian hanya mengundang kepala rumah tangga, artinya laki-laki yang diundang. Jadi negara masih sangat melihat masyarakat itu sebagai homogen. Jadi bahasa regulasinya itu selalu saja setiap orang atau setiap warga negara. Nah, pada masyarakat yang masih patriarkis seperti Indonesia, maka setiap negara ataupun setiap orang itu akan diterjemahkan gitu sebagai ya kepala rumah tangga, dan sebagian besar kepala rumah tangga di Indonesia sebagaimana Undang-Undang Nomor 1 Tahun 1984 tentang Undang-Undang Perkawinan itu menyebutkan bahwa kepala rumah tangga itu adalah laki-laki. Nah, padahal kalau misalnya kita lihat demikian juga ketika dilakukan kajian lingkungan hidup strategis atau analisis mengenai dampak lingkungan, begitu, itu tidak pernah diperhitungkan bagaimana potensi dampak itu akan dialami secara berbeda oleh perempuan karena beban gendernya, gitu. Kita lihat bagaimana perempuan menanggung dampak malpraktek pembangunan yang lebih berat dan mendalam. Sebagai contoh di Jakarta, proyek pembangunan tanggul laut misalnya, itu memperlihatkan bahwa air yang kemudian tanggul yang kemudian dibangun sehingga menghalangi pencucian secara alami wilayah pesisir, membuat air di wilayah pesisir itu kemudian menjadi sangat kotor, hitam, dan mengundang banyak nyamuk. Akibatnya adalah banyak anak-anak dan kemudian juga banyak perempuan yang memang lebih banyak menghabiskan waktunya di sekitar wilayah pesisir itu mengalami gangguan, jadi banyak digigit nyamuk dan kemudian itu sampai luka parah, mengalami gangguan kesehatan kulit begitu. Nah, bukan berarti hal itu tidak dialami oleh laki-laki, tapi karena situasi di Indonesia yang kemudian masih membebankan peran perawatan itu kepada perempuan, akhirnya kemudian perempuan juga menjadi kelompok yang mengalami situasi yang lebih sulit. Seperti halnya juga temuan SP dari proses FPAR yang dilakukan di Makassar, pembangunan Makassar Newport itu mengakibatkan penghasilan rumah tangga nelayan itu semakin menurun drastis begitu, yang kemudian berakibat bahwa kesulitan bagi perempuan untuk mengelola keuangan rumah tangganya. Dan ketika kesulitan itu seringkali pihak laki-laki nggak mau tahu begitu. Jadi berapapun yang didapatkan ketika menangkap serahkan, sementara kekurangannya itu yang akan menjadi tanggung jawab dari perempuan, sehingga banyak yang kemudian akhirnya terjerat hutang begitu untuk bisa tetap terus menyekolahkan anaknya dan lain-lain. Hal yang serupa juga terjadi di Jakarta, bagaimana kemudian reklamasi Teluk Jakarta itu membuat perempuan harus bekerja 18 jam sehari, selain karena beban domestiknya, tapi juga harus mencari tambahan pekerjaan lainnya, baik itu sebagai buruh cuci maupun juga pengepul barang bekas, begitu plastik dan lain sebagainya, untuk bisa mendapatkan tambahan uang. Karena di Jakarta air itu diprivatisasi, artinya dikelola oleh pihak swasta dengan kualitas yang buruk begitu dan harganya mahal gitu. Jadi mereka harus mencari uang tambahan untuk bisa membeli air, padahal kita juga sama-sama tahu bahwa air itu adalah kebutuhan manusia yang paling esensial. Berikutnya. Nah, ini adalah beberapa strategi yang dilakukan oleh solidaritas perempuan bersama dengan perempuan pesisir, perempuan nelayan yang ada di komunitas-komunitas SP. Jadi kami percaya bahwa perempuan itu memiliki daya, memiliki kekuatan, memiliki pengetahuan dan pengalaman yang sudah diwariskan dari generasi ke generasi untuk bagaimana mengelola pesisir secara berkelanjutan, secara tradisional. Dan kami juga percaya bahwa sebetulnya perempuan itu juga punya peran yang sangat signifikan dalam pengelolaan pangan, dari mulai produksi kemudian sampai ke distribusi dan hingga pangan tersedia di atas meja makan. Sesungguhnya perempuan memiliki peran yang sangat signifikan. Namun seringkali peran itu kemudian tidak diakui, tidak dilihat gitu, karena memang tidak dilihat karena memang yang dianggap sebagai stakeholder atau dianggap sebagai pemangku kepentingan itu hanyalah memang yang dilihat memiliki nilai produktif secara ekonomi. Sementara peran-peran perawatan, peran-peran menjaga keluarga itu dilihat, atau peran-peran reproduktif lainnya itu dilihat sebagai peran yang tidak berkontribusi terhadap pertumbuhan ekonomi dan lain-lainnya dalam kerangka teori makroekonomi. Tapi sebetulnya kalau kita lihat dari mulai bangun tidur sampai tidur lagi gitu kan, kalau mau didaftar begitu, jadi salah satu proses FPAR yang kami lakukan itu adalah kami membandingkan apa yang dilakukan oleh perempuan dan laki-laki dalam satu hari. Dan memang yang dilakukan oleh perempuan demikian banyaknya, dan tentunya yang dilakukan oleh perempuan itu adalah peran-peran yang jika tidak dilakukan, maka sesungguhnya peran produktif ataupun peran produktif yang dilihat secara ekonomi itu juga tidak akan berjalan dengan baik gitu. Nah, solidaritas perempuan kemudian melihat hal itu. Peran gender yang dilekatkan kepada perempuan inilah juga yang kemudian berimplikasi adanya kelekatan antara perempuan dengan wilayah pesisir. Nah, situasi-situasi ini yang tidak diperhitungkan. Seringkali kita mendapatkan fakta yang agak memprihatinkan karena pada awalnya memang ketika ditanya banyak perempuan yang tidak sadar bahwa sebetulnya apa yang mereka alami itu adalah sebuah situasi yang tidak adil. Jadi banyak dari mereka yang kemudian berpikir bahwa situasi keseharian yang mereka lakukan itu adalah sesuatu yang sifatnya takdir yang memang harus mereka terima sebagai perempuan. Nah, proses yang dilakukan oleh SP adalah bagaimana kemudian membangun pemahaman dan kesadaran kritis bahwa ada situasi ketidakadilan yang dialami oleh perempuan. Dan bahwa situasi ketidakadilan ini adalah sesuatu yang harus didobrak, yang harus diubah. Dan bagaimana kemudian perubahan itu adalah perubahan yang sistemik. Jadi artinya tidak menyasar pada perubahan yang sifatnya charity, kemanusiaan, dan lain-lain. Tapi memang yang didorong oleh SP bersama dengan perempuan akar rumput itu adalah bagaimana kita mendorong adanya perubahan sistem. Karena perubahan sistem itulah yang kemudian menjadi core dari gerakan politik feminis. begitu. Jadi kita melakukan pengorganisasian perempuan dan juga kita mendorong perubahan kebijakan, termasuk juga melakukan dialog dengan beberapa instansi terkait gitu, dan kita juga melakukan upaya-upaya litigasi, dan semua itu sebagai sebuah satu kesatuan yang tidak terpisahkan, karena memang dalam proses advokasi maupun dalam proses kampanye misalnya di SP bukan SP yang kemudian berada di depan begitu, tapi memang adalah perempuan akar rumput yang punya situasi, punya konteks, dan mereka yang mendorong perubahannya. Kiranya itu yang bisa disampaikan dari saya mewakili SP. Kita bisa perdalam lebih lanjut dalam proses diskusi. Terima kasih dan saya kembalikan kepada Andi.
Thank you. Thank you, Ari, for sharing. It was engaging. So I already took notes, your critical insight, but I will share later after we heard all of the presentations, right? And let's move on to Aisyah Rita. So we are expecting you are sharing us the tourism context, tourism sector as a context, and how the women in coastal communities can enjoy their rights collectively, including how they get their access and control to economic rights as a woman. And I'm curious what situation that can bring cost or disadvantage for women in coastal or fisheries. What is the way for government ensuring to protect them? Yeah, please share your critical insight. Thank you, Aisyah.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Dusha from Mauritius. Thank you for allowing us to participate in the webinar. Yeah. I will start with background from tourism in Mauritius. Tourism is the largest economic industry in Mauritius, as tourism brings in the foreign currencies needed for trade and provides employment for a huge population of the country. Fisheries is the second most important industry, and COVID-19 pandemic have proved the importance of fishing industry as it became the country's main income source, with international borders closed for the business and tourism industry, leading the government to take diversification of economy through fisheries, agriculture, and look for alternative options in manufacturing industry in Maldives. It would be further.
Sorry to intervene.
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit slow? Yeah. Thank you.
Bit slowly.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. So, we have been practicing, we have been doing tourism in Mauritius for now since 1972. So from the beginning also, due to the lack of awareness, the tourism industry has been practicing unsustainable development in the country. In the beginning, it was like for operating tourist guest house and these kind of places, coral shells and other ornamentals was taken from the reefs, and huge damage was given to the reef. And also to build the tourist resorts, it was mostly the reef has to be altered, and some of the to build harbors in these areas in the reefs, there was a lot of damage. So with due time, government brought in legislations to protect and how to do the development in tourism industry. So, however, this legislation has been mostly unmonitored, and hence the continuing of unsustainable practices in development of tourism industry. So I will just explain the main environment impact of tourism in Mauritius include the pressure on the very limited resources such as the reefs, species, lobsters, sea octopus, sea cucumber, and immature reef fish that is being taken for the demand of the tourist resorts and many safaris and many other tourist operating places. So in this case, we are also having again an unregulated, unmonitored, where any type of fish or an immature or a baby species also can be sold to the resorts, and nobody is being able to monitor these things also. And the other most pressing issue for us is that with the development of tourism industry came a huge waste which has been dumped, which has been continuously dumped from early tourism industry into the sea, and which can be calculated from we are having around 84 plus resorts in Mauritius, and if you say that about 1 to 2 tons of waste is being dumped into the ocean uh, from all the resources, that will be a huge environmental impact on the uh, environmental impact on the reefs and the open seas. And we are also, like other countries, facing pollutions of plastic pollution, metals, and other toxic waste being dumped into the sea. So these things are still being very much unregulated here in Mauritius also. So this is damaging our coastal areas.
Isaac,
So
sorry
yeah.
to interfere, because your voice also breaking. The translation process is not easy for the translator to translate to bahasa. Um, uh, do you have PPT or you don't have PPT, right? Maybe you can speak a little bit slower. So yeah, more slower. So the translator can capture your presentation.
Okay.
Because sometimes your voice is breaking
Sorry.
because of yeah the wake signal, yeah.
Okay. So for the local environmentalists like us and Save Maurice and other NGOs in the local community, the last few years have been very devastating for us, starting from the government willful damage to the largest mangrove in the country in Hadal Kurdufushi, which was reclaimed to make an airport, a domestic airport. So this mm, led to about 400 families losing their income, which was generated through the mangrove by making koya ropes and other things to be sold to Malay or the capital city Malay or to the resort. So this was one of the very devastating issue that started in the previous government. So after that, the making of domestic airport has increased because it is a government pledge to the locals to win votes in the name of development. However, this kind of development is very unsustainable and damaging to our country. And the string of these kind of airports is still ongoing, such as the development of Mafaro Airport. Mafaro Airport is also one of the places where Toto used to come and hatch, and a famous kind of a news was also there where the one of the Toto came and lay its egg on the runway of the airport. So this kind of damage, I mean, even though environment impacts and everything is done, and nobody is actually making it, the government is not actually committing to protecting these areas where the marine life depends on these coastal areas. So a very good example is Halik Horafushi, very recently made a new airport, which is one of our uh, leading the chair of the climate change committee. He is actually is his island and his constitution where these things are available. In Mauritius, we have alternative and we have the largest seaplane operations in the whole world, where we can have alternative of seaplanes, which is usually used in the resorts. So we have been asking for alternative and sustainable development options while developing our country, and government seems to ignore all our requests because these things are actually dealt with a lot of business tycoons, elites, and politicians being contractors, and and these unsustainable development projects is being continued since the last administration to till this administration. And one of our major concern is the current Gudi project land reclamation, which is a huge lagoon, something much bigger than the what we call the uh, palm island development of Dubai, and something which is actually not needed in Maldives for land reclamation is something not needed in Maldives, as we have enough and adequate islands in Maldives, so we don't need land reclamation. So we have been asking the government from our side to stop this unsustainable development, but we are still getting ignored uh, from all the government authorities currently in Maldives. The project which I am calling Gudifar project is worth about 64 million, and just only for $64 million, just only for the reclamation work, and is ongoing in currently even with economic collapse of the current COVID pandemic. Other islands near to the capital city also have been simultaneously reclaimed as of Kafu Mafushi, which is a tourist island and which has been a hotspot for the it is the one of the most famous island as a guest house for the local income opportunity. But this the whole of the reef has been actually reclaimed by now, and the islanders actually does not is very much misinformed this kind of reclamation as development shown near to the capital city Male. Mm, So this land reclamation projects is actually adjust the government pledge to decentralize resources and protect environment in the international platforms. The land reclamation project has so negatively affect the island communities previously depending on the natural resources for income, especially the women who used to sell coconuts to Male and also made coir ropes, palm trees to be sold to the resorts. The direct negative impact became so uncontrollable as thousands of Mauritius coconut palms were either stolen or illegally sold to reclamation projects. From taking from their natural habitats, these coconut palms in thousands was sold to the reclaimed areas of near to the central Male, and government does not seems to believe that these have an impact on environment, as they are justifying it as transferring from one place to another. However, the issue is that removing such a large number of trees from coastal areas actually leads to the island erosion, which is happening in large monsoon. We have seen a huge amount of many and huge amount of erosion at the island level, flooding at the island level as well. And increase in number of tidal waves at the island level. So since the Maldives is just 1 meter above the sea level, all even a very small kind of an kind of an natural disaster become very huge for us, because it just covers the whole island. I mean, it's like island erosion could be taking the sands or from beaches from well, let's say from 2 feet to 5 feet, the whole of the sand is being washed away and it's not being coming back, and the trees near the coastal areas are falling. So we are losing our natural resistant system in the islands due to the land reclamation project. Um, our government officials have misled the local communities by showing the reclamation of Furumale Island as a safe island and hope for the youth, while all mentioned impact is happening in front of our eyes. Further, Mauritius officials at the international platforms asked for the international taxpayers' money to protect one of the most vulnerable island nation in the world. Action and word of our political appointees does not match. Same Maurice, along with the environmental organizations, have been aggressively working on local community awareness on decentralization and importance of environmental protection. Further, participated in joint protest and climate strike event in front of the Parliament House to stop environmental degradations. Same bodies have also sent official letters to President Ibrahim Mohammed Solih asking for immediate action on climate emergency. Along with meetings, Climate Change Committee at the Parliament House, open letters have been published addressing to Majlis President Mohammad Nasheed due lack of response and inaction related to climate emergency. As the continuation of the land reclamation in name of development, we demand our lawmakers and policy makers to adapt to sustainable development as per the Maldives Constitution. Government commitment to climate action is mostly known and inaction in implementation of sustainable development. Existing law of environmental protection are ignored when government carries out mega projects such as Guri for reclamation projects. One of the challenges for us is the global cooperation such as Boskalis of Netherlands, whom are destroying our natural resources and giving irreversible damage to our ecosystem for huge profits. And there is no way for us to stop this large corporation either nationally or internationally. Hence, these corporations have so far been getting away with global environmental destruction without any accountability and responsibility taken for the destroying of these ecosystems in these vulnerable communities and areas. Same Maurice is persistent and continues its fight to save our identity, our natural resources, and our existence as a country in the world. We are fighting the willful damages of our politicians, our business tycoons, and also we are fighting the climate changes that is happening every day. So we are at mercy of our politicians, and we are trying our best, and from the locally and also internationally, we are asking help to stop this kind of unsustainable development. And we are also at the same time asking the donors such as United Nations, Green Environment Fund, and these global organizations to stop funding if a country is actually not committed to the sustainable development goals. And if their actions does not match to what is being implemented back at the country. So this is our environmental and coastal in a nutshell from the Maldives. Yes, thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, Alisat. It not only open our eyes, but also give us a new perspective based on what you presented. To make us do reflection upon. And now we will have Zoe Brand to remind us that women as a critical group can bring the collective power to change the world today. Mostly if we talk about the rights of fisher folks and women in coastal communities. Zoe, please give us your thoughts, and then also maybe you can answer the question like, how did your team in Transnational Institute decide on going to this particular direction, and then also there is a strong analysis of Dutch government have an economic interest in Asia across land reclamation projects. For example, what I said share that Portugal is like global actor in Asian regions land reclamation project, and yeah, and it also not happen in Maldives, but the was it the conflict also happened in New Zealand, in Indonesia. Like just last week, we got officers arrested, yeah, in South Sulawesi, and then also in Philippines, yeah, in many countries in Asia. So how you responded? Thank you, Zoe.
Thank you. My video isn't working, but that's okay because I'm going to share my screen anyway. But thank you for having me. If the host could enable my screen sharing, then I will show you my PowerPoint, perhaps.
Berarti bisa di-share presentasinya, Zoe?
How about now? No, still no. Okay. Yeah, seems to not be enabled.
Sorry, I don't know how to enable, but it should be the host. I'm spotlight video. What is it? Allow.
Or shall I send you my slides, Martin? I updated
Yeah,
them.
I already opened your slide. I will
Use this version that I sent you now, please.
Oh, the new one. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, wait.
In the meantime, I will just say it's a pleasure to be here with all of you. I will do my very best to speak slowly for the interpreters, but sometimes I speak quickly, so please stop me if I go too fast. I work for the Transnational Institute, which is indeed based in Amsterdam, but I'm actually in Spain. And we have been working on fisheries and food systems issues for some time now. And I've had the opportunity to learn from the women of SP, especially in Makassar, to understand how a lot of the foreign actors that you mentioned, our moderator mentioned, and also food system dynamics are affecting women in particular in coastal communities. But I also have worked a bit with the international organizations of small-scale fishers, the World Forum of Fisher People, WFFP in particular, and currently have been focusing more on fisheries issues in Europe, especially in France with our colleagues from Plein Mer, who has, maybe some of you know Thibaut, who has also spent time in Indonesia, where we are working on community-supported fisheries and alternatives to support coastal communities. So a lot of what I will share today is coming from those experiences. And I realize it's probably quite boring to look at a black screen. Martin, have you received my PowerPoint slide? I suppose I will just keep going, and you'll have to be slightly patient with the visual image, but I received some questions today for my presentation today, which were quite broad from the organizers of this webinar. But I've been asked to kind of identify some of the main problems or threats that I see that coastal communities are facing around the world, and then some of the strategies emerging and the role of women in those resistance efforts. Um, so, quite big questions. I've organized my thoughts around three kind of main problem areas that I have observed, which are common in all of the coastal communities that I have been in and visited and learned from. Okay, great. Here's my slides. So if you could go to the next slide, please, Martin. The first kind of problem area that I have observed is around natural resource grabs. The processes of reclamation in Indonesia are very familiar to many of you, I assume, and represent a kind of coastal or marine grabbing where fishers are often displaced from their um, from and have and their access to the marine resources needed for their livelihood are cut off. I think behind this logic of resource grabs, which are also happening in order to create space for tourism, as we just heard about, for large-scale aquaculture, as I've seen in Turkey, for large-scale conservation. This image is in Bintan for a high-end resort. Also quite common to make space for oil and gas and extractive industries offshore. So behind these kinds of increasing natural resource grabs, I see a logic of a sort of a blue economy discourse where the ocean is seen as the new frontier of economic investment for foreign actors. And so that's where you'll see Dutch companies are very aggressive in this area, but also the global multinational oil and gas companies as well. So this is probably many of you know a lot more about these issues in specific contexts, but in general, I would say this is one of the key problematics that coastal communities are facing and commonly around the world. The second, yeah, you can go to the next slide, please, Martin. The second kind of problem area that I wanted to highlight is around the food system itself and the inequalities that are created in and expressed through food exchange and food economies, where we see large global agribusiness and food retailers controlling massive parts of the value chain, powerful intermediaries pushing prices down for small scale fishers. There's an orientation towards export, which when crises hit, like the COVID situation or extreme weather events, can provoke massive food insecurity and in general sort of structures the food system in a way that undermines small scale and artisanal food producers like the fishers that many of us work with. And so, yeah, in fisheries, you also see the role of sort of these massive super trawlers, often owned by foreign actors, etc. So the third problem or sort of threat area, you can go to the next slide, please, that I wanted to highlight is the exploitative and invisibilized labor in fishing, in the fishing sector, which is a dangerous profession and activity by nature. But when stressed, the incentive to work longer hours and push workers and fishers into more and more dangerous conditions is exacerbated. So some of the things that are currently stressing labor and leading to such exploitative conditions that I've observed can be declining fish stocks. So then to compensate, fishers work longer hours, or especially in larger boats, but also in smaller boats, need to go farther offshore, and therefore need to spend more money on gas or diesel for the boat. So in order to compensate for the expense, work longer hours. Also, debt is a huge issue in the European context. The capital needed to enter into fisheries to get a boat with quota is massive. So many fishers are burdened with high levels of debt, which then drive which create a tendency where labor is the thing that is squeezed to make up for that economic stress. And in the European context, also, there's an increasing lack of generational renewal in fisheries. So young people who are European nationals are not wanting to join the sector. So they are increasingly hiring migrant labor, where the conditions and the wages are declining, and the administrative and vulnerability of migrant workers is taken advantage of to squeeze labor. The other thing I wanted to mention, especially in this webinar, given that the focus is on gender justice, is about the invisibilization of so much of the work that keeps the fisheries sector operating and running. So all of the sort of social reproductive tasks, the care work, often feminized work, women who are raising the kids, making the food, selling the fish, all of the stuff that is happening on land when men are on the boats fishing. Given the nature of fishing, a lot of times I think the image of somebody on a boat, which is usually a man, is the sort of what people see as fishing, without realizing that there is a whole tons of activities that are happening on land which make that work, which sustain that industry. So that's all of the mending of the nets, the preparing of the boats, the washing of the fish, the selling of the fish, the distributing, all of these things that are often done by women in many parts of the world are sort of not as celebrated or seen. And as was mentioned, women are often seen as the wife of a fisher rather than a fisher herself. So while the sort of devaluing of a lot of women's work is a huge challenge, it also, in the fishery sector, I think, is important to see the very strategic and important role and position that women occupy, because they are managing so much of the fishery sector, from the finances, the sales, the distribution, as I mentioned. And when it comes to building strategies of resistance to confront these three problem areas that I outlined, women are in a central, key, strategic position to lead those. So if you could go to the next slide, please, Martin. Could you go to the last slide, please, Martin? Thank you. So some of the strategies and resistance that I have seen women leading around the world, much of it inspired by the work of SP, I have to say, but also during the COVID crisis in France, for example, through collaborations with Plein Mer, who's working with fishers on the ground there. I also have the opportunity to understand the incredible leadership that women were able to take to confront the crisis situation in fisheries. So in terms of dealing with natural resource grabs, mobilizing and communicating and organizing, it seems sort of maybe a trivial detail, but a lot of the Facebook pages of fisher boats that Thibaut has been telling me about, the French fisheries, women are managing the Facebook page of many of the boats that their husbands fish on, because they are on land most of the time. So when it comes to communicating and organizing around issues, building alliances, networking, um, developing advocacy strategies, it's the fisher women who are really in charge of developing those messages and taking forward that work against natural resource grabs. The other important area that I've been working a bit more on is confronting the unjust food system and the ways that fishers are building alternative food systems or shifting the relations of power in their food, in their food, local food systems, or building food sovereignty, as we like to call it, where there's more control for small-scale fishers over how they sell, more direct contact with their local consumers. So in that sense, especially during the COVID crisis, when the export-oriented food system sort of, we saw a lot of its vulnerabilities and collapses because travel is not as easy, etc. Really opened up opportunity for fishers to develop more direct sales, more whether that was via apps or through small groups of consumers, or that we use this terminology, community-supported fisheries, where they really were able to try to build relationships with more local consumers, and go around intermediaries to regain some of that market share, which is beneficial to fishers in general, but also creates a more stronger localized food system that is less vulnerable to crises like COVID. And a lot of the direct sales is managed by fisher women. So that shift and that sort of building of a different type of food economy is being led by fisher women. And finally, in terms of sort of visibilizing the labor and the role of fisher women, I mean, I think my best example and most inspiring experience is definitely with coming from my work with SP and there. So the participatory action research and analysis that Ari was describing, and the sort of empowerment of fisher women to be more visible and to make demands and to go to local parliament and to build alliances, all contributes to visibilizing the role of fisher women as protagonists of change, as key in the struggles against ocean grabbing, as central in the building of alternative food economies, and yeah, I think the work in Makassar in particular, and the feminist leadership schools, and all of the research that SP does is a great example of um, how those activities can contribute to demonstrating the power of fisherwomen in these types of resistance and building of alternatives. So I think I've used my 15 minutes. I hope I didn't speak too quickly. I will leave it there and look forward to hearing the rest of the speakers. Thank you.
Halo, Andi.
Hello. Sorry, are you done with your presentation? I'm sorry,
Yes,
I just joined. Yeah, I just joined because my internet just disconnected.
okay. Yes, I have finished. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. I sorry, I just took note. Okay, Zoe, thank you for your story. It was very interesting. Your presentation also really insightful. And yeah, let's go to Yvang Tan. Yvang Tan is the case coordinator. I'm sure you do so many researches and case developments regarding the issue the women in the fisher folks and coastal communities struggle with, including the hunger situation that faced by encountered by women. And I'm also curious, could you explain more detail on that, give the examples, and also please tell us how the rights to food can be able to protect and empower fisher folk as the framework, especially women in the fisher folk and coastal communities. Over to you, Ivang.
Okay, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to first of all say thank you for inviting Fian to participate in this very crucial event, and we're very happy to be part of the dialogue. Um, there are several consecutive meetings taking place, and I had to find a room where I can sit by myself in order not to overburden the house Wi-Fi. I was wondering if I could also just switch off the camera because I have prepared the presentation. I see that Martin is already sharing it. So yeah, thanks. Okay, so thank you very much again. I was requested to talk about the right to food and related rights of fisher folk with focus on women. And in terms of my presentation today, I have structured as the following. Maybe Martin, you could already share the next slide. So first of all, I will briefly introduce my organization, FIA International, in 3 sentences. So you have an idea of what we do. And then I would already dive into the right to food. What is it? To share with you the normative content and also some related rights. And finally, give a short presentation on how FIAN work around the right to food and how we use the method, some of the methods we use as FIAN as a tool to fight for the right to food. So briefly on my organization, Martin, if you could just jump to the next and the next slide. And the next. Yeah. Okay, so we are an international organization working for the right to food. We are a member-based organization, and as of now, we do have 19 national sections in 4 different regions. So we have our offices in Europe, in Africa, in Latin America, as well as in Asia. And I would like to also say that we have now a new section in FIAN in Indonesia, which is FIAN Indonesia. We have consultative status with the UN Economic and Social Council, which means we participate in different human rights bodies. And the primary area of our work is to analyze document cases of violations or threat of right to food, awareness raising, capacity building, advocacy, and lobby at national and international levels. And I'll go into more into detail in my presentation. Next, Martin. So now the right to food. I don't know how many of you have heard about the right to food and nutrition. So that's the right, the human right or the tool that we use at FIA International. Um, Before talking a bit about the right to food, I just wanted to say a few words or just give you some information related to hunger, situation, and women. So according to the very latest SOFI report, and you have the number here, you have, or we have as of now, listen, hold on, sorry, my presentation on my screen is a bit small, so I can't really see the number. Okay, so as of now, we have 690 million people suffering hunger and malnutrition, and due to coronavirus, we will have 83 to 132 million additional people suffering. So this was reported in the very latest state of the food security that was issued by FAO and other agencies at UN. And we know that most hungry people today live in rural areas where food is produced. Among those, 60% are women. Women's role in feeding the world is vital. I think it has already been mentioned how women are involved in production, processing, storage, trading, preparation, and women are also traditionally responsible for the entire reproductive labor and care work, which was also mentioned, related to breastfeeding, cooking, fetching of water, fodder, fuel. Um, in many communities, women are the bearers of traditional knowledge around plants, fisheries, biodiversity, and seeds, and they are in fact protectors of forests, rivers, lakes, and seas. So you see that women are not just, food producers, but they're indeed, or we are indeed food finders, providers, protectors, and we are the feeders of our husbands, families, and communities. But women continue to be disproportionately affected by hunger, and we are often invisible in food systems. We are denied or we have less access to natural resources. Our care work is poorly recognized or not paid. And often women are victims of various types of violence at household, community, and more structural levels in public policies. We have also witnessed during the COVID time that there has been increased burden of unpaid care work and domestic violence on women. Having to dedicate more time for care work means that we often sacrifice our jobs and income, which negatively then impact our family's right to food. Domestic violence can also cause women to eat less, to be the last to eat, or not eat at all. And women are discriminated often and have very limited possibilities to participate and take decisions in policy areas that concern us. However, we're not silent as we're seeing. And in every corner of the world, we see how women are challenging. We're at the forefront of the struggle for non capitalist use of natural resources. We're challenging the injustices that we face and coming up with our own people centered solutions. Then next, Martin, please. So the right to food of fisher folk, we like to start off by saying that food is more than calories. Food is a commons and it's a human right. The definition you see here is provided by the UN. And it says that the right to adequate food is realized when every man, woman, and child, alone or in community with others, has physical and economic access at all times to adequate food or means for its procurement. So the right to food, we can say it's an individual right as well as a collective right. And I think this collective dimension is very relevant for fisherfolk. So for example, community of fisherfolk that loses its access to certain fishing areas that meet their food needs, their food needs or the food needs of members of the rural community will be able to assert the right to food by asking for recourse to this collective dimension. We at FIAN understand that the right to food can only be realized and fully realized if women's rights violations are tackled. This is because there is an increasing recognition that violence and discrimination against women and girls, which deprive them of the totality of their rights and their freedom to choose how to live their lives, is indeed one of the main structural causes of hunger and malnutrition. And we also understand that the nutrition has to be at core because we need to depart from a very narrow understanding of food that focuses on calories and therefore quantity of food to have a much greater attention to the nutritional dimension of food that emphasize the quality of food and diversity of diets. And the full realization of the right to food will only take place if we take a look at the right to food from the framework of food sovereignty that emphasizes self-determination of people, and the people are at the heart of food issues, and the right of people to define and to also control their food systems. I think that was already mentioned by several speakers already. And lastly, wanted to highlight that the right to food cannot be realized if we ignore the interconnectedness of human rights. This is because human rights are indivisible, and violation of one right cannot be looked at without taking into account its implication for the enjoyment of other rights. Then next slide, please. Okay, so here is a slide on the normative content of the right to food. I'll just go into briefly what is the normative content. So the right to food needs to be adequate. The food needs to be adequate. It needs to be available. It needs to be accessible, and it also needs to be sustainable. And just briefly on each of these normative content. Adequate just simply means that the food, one intake has to be free from dangerous substances such as chemicals that come from polluted water and soil. And it must fulfill the dietary nutritional needs, for example, taking into consideration young children and elderly. And it also has to be culturally acceptable. Just to give you an example of what it's not and what it not should be, during COVID, we have seen how bad beans that have basically gone bad, they were provided to people in that situation. You cannot say that, adequacy part of the right to food was fulfilled. The second item or the second normative content is availability. It just basically means that there has to be possibility for people to feed yourself or your families directly from productive natural resources such as fishing grounds or land, or from being able to buy in shops. And in COVID, we have also seen that due to market disruption and stockpiling, the food was actually not available. I mean, there's some reports and people saying that, food was actually available during COVID, but from the right to food perspective, it has not been because people really, because food was simply not there. And in terms of accessibility, there are two accessibility. One is economic accessibility, which means that food needs to be accessible as a result of economic activity in the wildest sense, either through food production or work, so through income and wage. And economic accessibility also means that you should not have to choose between, for example, buying food or going to the doctor. Then physical accessibility means that food must be accessible to everybody, including physically vulnerable individuals, young children, and also elderly people. And lastly, sustainability means that food has to be sustainable economically, socially, and also environmentally. So that is the normative content of the right to food. Next slide, please. So when we talk about the right to food or human rights in general, you have obligations, you have duty bearers and right holders. So we as humans, we are the rights holders. We have these rights, and who have to fulfill them, who have to realize these rights for us, it's the state. So the state has obligations, and with respect to the right to food, the state has three levels of obligation. Well, actually, this is not in relation to the right to food, but these obligations are actually generic, so it apply to all different human rights. The first obligation is the obligation to respect, and this is quite simple. It just requires states to not act to deprive people of their existing access to food or food producing resources. So if, for example, actions of state for example, states passing a law or adopt policies or measures which destroy people's existing access to food or food producing resources or coastal resources, then it would imply that state had failed to oblige vis-a-vis its respect about obligation. Just to give you some examples, during the last webinar, Herman Kumara from Sri Lanka was talking about blue economy, and he was also explaining how the National Physical Plan is being rolled out to support blue economy, which means there are several infrastructure and tourism projects that are being implemented along coastal lines. And that, of course, means, taking away people's access to marine resources, right? Or, for example, also similarly, in Sri Lanka, um, Inzo was taken away by government actors and also military to develop luxury tourists. And what they did is they evicted families. About 2,500 families were evicted, and they were denied access to fishing ground. So in such situations, it would constitute violation of the state's obligation to respect the right to food. Another example I wanted to bring from Indonesia is Makassar Newport, which was already mentioned, and I'm happy to have communities from that area. The Newport has banned fishers, as I understand, from conducting fishing activities, so that would also constitute a violation of the obligation to respect. Then the next obligation is to protect access to food. And this is basically the state's obligation to actively prevent, I think it's important, this activeness, to prevent or to stop third parties from depriving people of their existing access to food or food producing resources. So destructive agent in this case is the third party. So it's not states actors, but it's third party. It could be a person, it could be a private corporation or another state. I have here an example of Jakarta Bay project because I do see that and I understand that there was an involvement of foreign companies. You have several project developers, constructors and dredging companies who are aided probably by the government to basically to deny access of fishing grounds of the coastal inhabitants in this situation. That would therefore constitute the obligation, the failure of the state to oblige in protecting the right to food of the fishers. While the first two obligations, the individuals or groups or communities in question already enjoy access to food, the obligation to fulfill, which is the last obligation, pertains to individuals, groups who lack access to food. So in such situations, states must provide social protection schemes to ensure that people have access to the right to food. This means if a state fails to provide social protection schemes or, for example, discriminate a particular group from accessing such schemes, then it would constitute a violation of fulfillment bound obligation. So these were three levels of obligations I wanted to share with you. Then the next slide, please, Martin. So by no means fisherwomen only have the right to food. I tried to put some related rights here. So you see that, fisherwomen actually do have an array of human rights. So left top, you have the right to food, which also include the right to access to natural resources, women's rights, and there are other rights, because human rights, as I have said, are interrelated and also indivisible. So you have, for example, the right to water and sanitation. You have the right to health. You have the right to work. You have the right to safe and healthy environment, and you also have the right to housing. This is by no means exhaustive, but I just wanted to highlight how very often, if you have the right to food violated, then that would have, implication on the right to health. It would then have an implication on the right to work, because you will not be able to work. And so it would just show, it basically shows how rights are interrelated, they're very, deeply connected. And in order to um, ensure and guarantee the right to food, we have to make sure that all these related rights are realized as well. Sorry. Next slide. So here I have put together some legal sources of the right to food of fisherfolk, um, and also in general, women in rural areas. I will not go into detail, but just to highlight, first of all, the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, Article number 11, which talks about standard of living, that includes food, housing, and in continuous improvement of living conditions. And the same article also talks about the fundamental right to be free from hunger. The second source I wanted to mention is the Convention on the Elimination of all forms of discrimination against women, CEDAW, Article 11, that addresses the elimination of discrimination against women in the different fields, such as employment, that women should have equal remuneration, and also protection of health and safety in working conditions. Then we have in the United Nations declarations on the rights of indigenous peoples. One article I would like to highlight here is the right to lands, territories, and resources, and the right to use, own, and control them. But also, I think important to maybe add is Article 3, which talks about self-determination. Then we have United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Peasants and Other People Working in Rural Areas. This was adopted very recently, I think about 1.5 years ago. And would like to highlight Article 4, which talks about non-discrimination against women, but there are also many articles that apply, such as Article 5, right to natural resources, also right to food and food sovereignty, that is Article 15. Then I would also want to emphasize CEDAW General Recommendation 34 on rural women. Especially this is one, let's say, document that specifically highlights the right to food and nutrition. If you read, often UN documents only refer to the right to food, but this document specifically and explicitly refers to the right to food and nutrition. And Article 3 talks about food and nutrition. Then I would conclude by mentioning, of course, small-scale fisheries guidelines. Of course, you're all very aware of them, especially Chapter 6 that talks about decent work, 7 on value chain, post-harvest and trade, and 8, which is gender equality, as well as the sister guidelines on tenure that emphasizes gender equality, equal tenure rights for women and men. And before I conclude and go to the next slide, I just wanted to say that many of the sources that I just mentioned are the result of concerted efforts and struggles of communities and social movements in pushing for new instruments to safeguard their human rights. Okay, last but not least, if you could go to the next slide, Martin. I wanted to conclude my presentation by sharing with you some of the working methods of FIAN, and just to share how the right to food can be used in different activities that I will mention to you now. What I did here is I try to explain in the diagram the work that we do. You will see in the center two arrows. One is blue and the other one is red. The blue arrow is going up to the international level from the local and national level. And then the red arrow is coming down from the international level to the local and national level. This is basically Fian's theory of change. We call this loop of eight because you picture this as a number of eight, and it's going up and it's coming down. So it's really going from the local to the international and coming to the local. And therefore, the title of this slide is from national, international, and national. So it's this ongoing loop of eight. That is the basis of our theory of change. And at the local level, maybe just to highlight, of course, we do a lot of capacity development and awareness raising because we do believe that is the very essential thing. If we want the right to food to become a real tool for communities to claim, then it's vital that they know what the right to food is and related rights and how they can demand the implementation and realization of these rights from their government. So that's capacity development. In case documentation, we claim to be a case-based organization, which means that we use human rights lens. We look at what are the actions and omissions of the states, and we use the information we have through research and also in interaction with communities in doing analysis of what have been the breaches of different obligations of the state, as I have mentioned in one of my previous slides. And we do this through more actively now, I think, through participatory action research. And what Ari explained earlier about this feminist participatory action research, I think we have a lot to learn from you, Ari. So it'd be nice to see how we could collaborate on this. So basically, we do participatory action research. We also conduct fact-finding missions and of course, which has an awareness raising component, advocacy component, and also try to give visibility of the cases at the international level. And we also do a lot of networking and alliance building. I think that's key in the face of multiple crises and challenges we're facing. That's key. And we are part of different networking and alliances. But just to mention one here is the Global Network for the Right to Food. It's a network of an initiative of public interest CSOs and social movements. We have peasants organizations, fisher folks organizations, pastoralists, IPs, and food and agriculture workers as part of the network. And I'm really happy to see AR from the Philippines, who is the network communications officer taking part in this webinar. She has also participated the last one, and I understand that she will report on the webinar, on the series of webinars you're having. And I'm mentioning this because Fian serves as the secretariat. And the network, basically what it tries to do is to open space for dialogue, to mobilize its members and try to hold states accountable for their obligation to realize the right to food. So we do collective actions. We have global fact-finding missions. Initially, we had a plan to do a fact-finding mission in Indonesia on fisher folk. Let's see how that rolls out. It cannot be further perceived due to COVID, but let's see. We do collective research and also collective monitoring. Then I wanted to sort of say how that fits into the international level. So what we do is the case documentation, the work we do at international level. No, I'm still on the same slide. Do I need to go a bit quicker? I lost track of my time and I don't know how much time I still have or if my time is over.
Yes, Eva, if it's
Can I?
possible.
Okay, I'll be really quick. Okay, sorry. Okay, okay. So just moving to the international level, what we do is we use the work at the national level and we bring it to the international level. There are several ways we do this, and I've only highlighted two here. So we have Human Rights Council. The objective of the Human Rights Council is to address situations of human rights violations and make recommendations to the state, right? And as a civil society organization, we have a chance to participate in Human Rights Council, and we can also contribute by sending a Universal Periodic Review, UPR. I have it here mentioned on my slide. And maybe just to share with you what we did in March 2019, we submitted a joint submission highlighting China's extraterritorial obligations. So we say that a state does not only have human rights in general, it also has extraterritorial state obligation, meaning that if an actor from a state conducts activities that leads to abuses or threats of violations, then the country of this actor needs to be held accountable for the human rights abuses and violations. So what we did is we submitted this joint submission. We had cases highlighting from Sri Lanka. We also had a case highlighting from Indonesia. It's a case, some mining case in Bangka Island with the support of KNTI. And we received so what this happened what happens is that when a state is under review, so China was under review during its March session, other states can make recommendations. So in total, China received 346 recommendations, and China actually accepted 284 recommendations. And of these 284 recommendations, about two were related to international cooperation and to human rights and environment, which was a record number. And what happens now is that China will have to now report in 2 years' time to the UN Human Rights Council on the progress of implementing these recommendations. And of course, we know that very often, states are not they're quite reluctant in implementing these recommendations, but it's an important point of leverage for our work. Just to highlight two recommendations, which I think could also be a tool if you have cases that deal with Chinese companies or Chinese banks or actors. There were two recommendations which were made by one by Ecuador and one by Peru, requesting China to promote measures to ensure that development and infrastructure projects inside and outside their country are fully consistent with human rights and respect the environmental and sustainability of natural resources. And the second recommendation that was issued by Peru says that China should consider the establishment of a legal framework to guarantee that activities carried out by industries subject to its jurisdiction do not negatively impact human rights. So these were quite strong recommendations that I think civil society organizations can use. Then going quickly, what we did is we submitted this UPR. We also submitted oral and written statement. And as CSOs, you have an opportunity to hold side events. So we held a side event inviting fisher community representatives. We had a representative from Sri Lanka. We also had a representative who couldn't come because of not getting a visa, sharing with us the impact of the right to food from women's perspective. So it was a very enriching side event where we also invited FAO and Office of the High Commissioner to take part in this side event. And going very quickly, I'm sorry, I'm taking much of your time, is treaty bodies. And here I just mentioned CESCR and CEDAW. There are 9 treaty bodies, nine international treaties in total, and there are 9 treaty bodies. It's basically a committee that looks after the reporting and monitoring. Again, here CSOs have an opportunity to send parallel reports because very often, states want to say how nice they have implemented human rights. And of course, civil society organization could pinpoint and say, no, actually, the implementation was not so good because we have cases from here and there. So as VN, we often submit para reports, also supporting a CSO submitting a report. And often there are also recommendations very similar to UPR. The committee also issues recommendations. And just quickly, we also organize site event where we then have a chance to interact with these committee members and try to have them come up with, recommendations that you want them to highlight. Often they also highlight recommendations on specific cases of violation of the right to food. And just to conclude this part of the presentation, I want to say that CEDAW, Indonesia will be up for review, I think next year for CEDAW. So I think there is also a chance for a collaboration. Okay, then I will conclude. Just give me 2 more minutes. The left-hand side, you see special rapporteurs. So the Human Rights Council has, let's say, a way to also monitor human rights by installing different special procedures. These are called. So these are like experts from different thematic areas. And I just wanted to highlight that there is a special rapporteur who is the right for the right to food. And the picture you see is Professor Michael Fackery. He's a law professor in Oregon, USA, and he was recently appointed as the new special rapporteur on the right to food. So what they do is special rapporteurs, they produce thematic reports on specific themes. And just to highlight that the previous special rapporteur had a thematic report on fishery workers. And the previous right to food special rapporteur on the right to food also had a country report after her visit to Indonesia. And there, her recommendation is to implement, the recommendation to the government is to implement fully the FAO tenure guidelines and also the small-scale fisheries guidelines. So I think here you also have a leverage in terms of how to push the government to implement small-scale fisheries guidelines. Yeah, maybe I have taken up much of your time. I really want to apologize, but I hope I was able to at least show you some of the working methods. And just to conclude that I think I am fully in line and agree area that we need structural changes. And we would be very happy to see how FIAN could support communities and how we can, gear up our efforts in our fight against injustices for the promotion of the right to food. So that's basically it. And I'm sorry for taking much of your time.
Excellent. Thank you, Yvonne. I learned a lot from you. Okay, just come back to effective, yeah. We already heard a presentation and answer from the panelists, Ariska, Itzagusa, Joy Brand, and Yvonne Tang. It was very interesting discussion. Actually, I wanted to highlight two top 4 insights. That's what I got. I already took notes, but I think I prefer to keep them in the last, because I would like to hear any response, comments, and clarification or question from SP communities, from SP Angin Mamiri in Makassar, SP Kendari from in South East Sulawesi, and then also SP Sebai in Lampung. So actually they are watching us from different areas in Indonesia. And yeah, please do so. Please share your experience regarding your situation, your perspective. What are the challenges that you always encounter or face, or what advocacy or movement building you involve while you're organizing fisher folks collectively. So we have like, if you don't mind, like we have like 5 minutes for each of you to share. Who's gonna be first? SP Angin Mamiri, maybe? Or SP Kendari? Or SP Sebai Lampung? Ini SP Kendari yang mau bicara ya, Bu?
Bicara tentang apa?
Oh ya, kalau ada sharing pengalamannya Ibu apa namanya sebagai perempuan di pesisir, sebagai nelayan perempuan, kendalanya bagaimana ketika apa namanya organisir perempuan-perempuan lain atau membentuk kelompok perempuan, terus juga gimana apa namanya keluhan-keluhannya sebagai nelayan perempuan, ya bisa cerita apa proses-proses yang apa ibu-ibu alami.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Perkenalkan, nama saya Darmawati, perwakilan dari Kelurahan Sodohoa, Kendari.
Ya, lanjut Bu.
Terima kasih banyak atas kepercayaan yang telah diberikan kepada saya. Sudah perkenalkan nama kasih. Tidak, pekerjaan saya sehari-hari, suami saya menjual ikan selama berapa tahun. Terus saya membantu suami saya untuk menambah kebutuhan sehari-hari dalam rumah tangga, menjual kue dengan membuat kerajinan tangan. Dan setelah itu suami saya sudah tidak lancar lagi menjual ikan di pelelangan, menjual ikan di pasar, karena diadakan adanya kekurangan penghasilan. Terus untuk dalam rumah tangga, suami saya sudah bermalas-malasan untuk mencari kehidupan sehari-hari atau menafkahi istri. Setelah dia mengenal yang namanya game online. Setiap kali disuruh pergi mencari, alasannya tidak ada ikan, tidak ada yang lain. Akhirnya saya memutar penghasilan sendiri, mencari sendiri penghasilan dengan cara berjualan kue keliling. Setelah saya terus mengatakan pada suami saya untuk supaya bisa melakukan pekerjaan yang lain atau apa, tapi dia sudah tidak pernah mau mencari karena gara-gara game online. Jadi setiap kali disuruhan pertengkaran dalam rumah tangga sering terjadi. Dan sekarang saya sudah tinggal sendiri untuk membiayai kedua anak saya. Mungkin itu saja yang bisa saya sampai.
Boleh, ya mungkin boleh cerita apa namanya pengalaman Ibu join ya, gabung ke solidaritas perempuan gitu, apa yang Ibu dapatkan, lalu juga apa namanya perubahan apa yang terjadi dengan diri Ibu gitu. Bisa share ya?
Ya, terima kasih banyak atas perhatian yang diberikan kepada saya. Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Tadi Bu, dia bertanya, setelah kita kenal SP, perubahan apa yang kita dapat?
Selama saya bergabung di SP, saya sudah banyak mendapatkan pengalaman selama bergabung di SP dan mendapatkan banyak teman dan mendapatkan penguatan diri dan untuk diri saya sendiri dan untuk bagaimana cara untuk membiayai kedua anak saya. Mungkin itu saja yang bisa saya sampaikan.
Terima kasih Ibu. Enggak kok. kasih Ibu udah sharing. Karena waktunya terbatas, nggak apa-apa ya. Kita pindah ke komunitas yang lain.
Terima kasih banyak atas kesempatan yang diberikan. Terima kasih banyak.
Siap Ibu.
Salam dari Kelurahan Sodowa.
Salam juga buat teman-teman SP Kendari ya Bu. Ya, bagaimana komunitas yang udah siap mau sharing dari SP Anggeng Mamiri atau dari SP Sebai? Siapa yang mau duluan berbagi dengan kita?
Lampung.
Oh Lampung, oke Lampung dulu deh. Nggak apa-apa ya, yang di Makassar. Oke, silahkan. Dekat kamera sini. Ya, oke.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Kenalkan, nama saya Ibu Rizky dari Sebai Lampung, daerah Lampung, Sidang khususnya. Saya mau ngomong masalah para nelayan bapak-bapak yang ada di kampung kami. Jadi kampung kami itu memang mayoritasnya nelayan. Ada nelayan yang mungkin yang dia pakai perahu, ada yang dia pakai semacam bagan. Nah, kalau di orang Bugis itu di sini bagan. Ada juga yang agak meningkat dikit, dia kapal motor itu dibuat seperti bagan, tapi dia besar. Nah, jadi itu ada tahap-tahapnya. Itu biasanya sebelum ini waktu ada COVID ya mungkin lancar-lancar saja. Tapi sekarang setelah adanya COVID ini, para nelayan itu kurang pendapatannya. Ditambah apalagi ada COVID seperti ini, kita juga mau keluar dan agak susah, yang beli juga mungkin agak susah. Kalau saya kan sebagai pedagang ikan. Nah, jadi yang untuk bapak-bapaknya pun kadang-kadang bukan semalam atau 2 malam di laut. Kadang-kadang sampai setengah bulan. Nah, setengah bulan itu di lautan, kadang pulang pun dia nggak bawa uang. Ya, termasuk saya dan suami ibu ini kan adalah. Nah, dari itu yang kami apa rasakan untuk saat ini yang terdampak COVID ini memang sudah nggak bisa disolider lagi. Soalnya sudah susah, mau cari uang ke luar sudah susah, mau dapetin dari hasil jual juga susah, apalagi ya saya masih ada ya anak-anaknya yang sebenarnya mengikuti bidang kuliah, yang sekolah, yang bukan saya aja, yang mungkin ibu-ibu juga masih seperti itu ya, itu keadaan seperti itu. Nah, jadi terus masalah yang hak layak dia hak pangan itu ya mungkin adalah sebagian yang dapat bantuan, ataupun yang nggak dapat bantuan. Kadang-kadang ya kita yang nggak dapat bantuan itu yang mungkin agak merasa seperti apa, karena kan pembagiannya itu nggak begitu merata. Jadi kalau bisa yang pembagian itu yang serata mungkin kalau menurut kami. Untuk saat ini ya seperti ini. Kita dari ibu-ibu yang lain bagaimana? Ada lagi? Ya, saya dari perwakilan ibu-ibu dari Sebai Lampung Sidang yang untuk itu yang kami rasakan seperti itu aja. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih Ibu. Ya, kita langsung ke ini ya komunitas yang terakhir nih. Agak kare bebe tonji. Oke, ayo langsung aja Bu.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Nama saya Nuni dari Makassar. Kami dari perempuan pesisir Makassar telah mendapat dampak dari Newport, dari dampak reklamasi pembangunan. Kami ingin perempuan di Makassar diakui karena selama ini tidak ada kartu nelayan kami. Yang dapat itu cuma laki-laki yang dapat ini kartu nelayan. Sehingga kalau ada bantuan, perempuan tidak pernah dapat. Yang dapat itu cuma laki-laki. Terus dampak dari Newport ini, selama ada pembangunan, kami sudah tidak pernah lagi melaut. Karena dampaknya Newport mengganggu pendapatan kami di laut. Sehingga perempuan banyak yang cari pencarian mata pencarian lain. Ada yang bekerja di pabrik, ada yang memasak di bangunan-bangunan, ada yang ke rumah-rumah untuk ini pinjam uang karena tidak ada pencarian karena dari dampak ekonomi corona juga tidak ada pendapatan suami. Akhirnya kami ini meminta hak sebagai perempuan pesisir. Apakah pemerintah bisa memenuhi hak kami sebagai perempuan pesisir? Tidak dilibatkan dalam rapat pengambilan keputusan identitas kami tidak dihitung sebagai warga negara yang memiliki hak yang bukan pangan untuk sehari-hari. Selama ini yang ada hanya SP yang membantu kami. Selama ada SP, kita bisa berjuang, kita bisa melawan hak-hak kami. Kami ingin hak kami dipenuhi dari pembangunan Newport ini. Kami tidak ingin lahan kami diambil begitu saja. Kita mau makan dari mana kalau hak kami diambil? Terus ada rencana pembangunan pesisir akan digusur. Kami mau tinggal di mana kalau misalkan pesisir diambil? Sedangkan lahan kami sudah diambil. Terus tempat tinggal kami nantinya akan digusur. Apakah ada pemerintahan yang ingin membantu kami atau bagaimana? Sehingga kami bisa mendapat hak kami sebagai perempuan pesisir dan juga perempuan hak-hak yang ingin kami minta. Sekian, terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Ayo bareng-bareng dong, dibuka mic-nya. Hidup perempuan.
Hidup perempuan pesisir.
Okay, so aku ngomong bahasa Inggris lagi ya, Bu. So we did hear the stories they struggle with from Lampung in South Sulawesi, in East Sulawesi, on how they cope and resist the situation for women to get their rights to food and being part of decision-making process. And yeah, we also want to hear any response or comments or clarification from any regional organization. Maybe we can start from Plan Bear, one of our global organization, to share the situation that women in France suffer. You can start.
Okay. Can you see me?
Yes.
Oke. Selamat sore Bapak-bapak, Ibu-ibu. Saya mau ngomong bahasa Inggris ya. So yeah, to make a quick intervention about the French situation during the COVID, the issue we had in this moment in the fisheries sector is that basically the whole industry collapsed because there were two countries that were touched pretty heavily by the disease, which were Italy and Spain. And these markets are really important for the fisheries industry in France because a big part of the fish is sold in Spain and Italy. So most of the fish marketers couldn't sell their fish to Spain and Italy anymore, and so they had to stop buying fish, which made the price. I mean, they basically stopped buying fish. The prices decreased quite a lot, and so some fish auction had to just stop and close. And so the fishers couldn't sell their fish anymore, so they had to just stop fishing. So in the first 2 weeks, it was basically a chaos. There was no market, fishers were not going at sea. At some point, there was 90% of the fleet not going at sea, which is like never, I mean, there are fishers who are like 60 years old and never saw that in their whole life. So it was a really new situation. And then what happened is that the small scale sector, and particularly the boats using direct selling, managed to progressively fish again, go at sea again, and sell their catch mostly directly to the consumer. But for the big boats, it was really tricky because they are catching volumes, tons of fish, and they couldn't continue fishing because the price was basically not here. And so what we did as in Plenmer, we work mostly on direct selling of fish, but like way before the crisis. And then during the crisis, lots of fishers that we didn't know came to us to ask for advices and to learn how to do direct selling, or maybe they were doing a bit of direct selling before the crisis and they decided to do more direct selling. And so what they needed was basically communication about their direct selling. And we published a map before actually the crisis, a month before. And the objective of this map was to basically inform the consumer about all the fishers that are doing direct selling in France. And during this period, basically the map was pretty useful for fishers because they could just call me and ask to appear on it so that the consumer know that this boat is actually active during confinement and selling fish. And actually the consumers were pretty happy about it because the big supermarkets are working with the big industrial fisheries sector. So they didn't have fish anymore. And the only way to buy fish was basically to buy directly to the fishers. So yeah, that's basically what happened during the crisis. And another thing that happened, which is, more like an issue, during these 2 weeks where there was basically like no boats at sea, or maybe 10% of the fleet, there was 4 super trawlers in the Bay of Biscay, which is just a fishing ground close to France. And these super trawlers are not like 20 meters or 30 meters. They were like 100 meters, 120. So it's like really huge boats that can catch 200 tons a day, which is like insane, basically. And so the fishers saw that they were not able to go at sea because of the prices, but these huge boats are basically, they integrated the whole value chain, so they just freeze the fish at sea, and then the fish is frozen. It can wait until it's sold, and if it's not sold in that moment because there is no price, then it will be sold later. And so there was like a big mobilization of the fishers in this moment because of these huge industrial trawlers in the middle of their fishing grounds while they were not able to fish. And yeah, that's pretty much what happened during the 3 months of like intense crisis, lockdown, confinement stuff. And now it's progressively getting better. The market is quite good again. All the boats are at sea again. There is no like stuff about boats not being at sea, and fishers are mobilized against super trawlers. Actually, we are organizing a big mobilization in 10 days because the industry that own these trawlers is basically they renewed. They have a new trawler, basically 80 meters boat, a huge thing that is going to catch like hundreds of tons of fish a day. And so we organized a big mobilization. And I would say that the role of women during this whole crisis was really important, because during the COVID moment, they were the one contacting us to organize and get advice about how to do direct selling. Most of the time, they are the ones selling the fish. So they were really the one organizing the whole communication that was needed to sell the fish during the crisis moment. And because they have this like important role in communication, they are the one managing the, like, each boat in France has a Facebook page when they sell their fish directly, so that they can communicate with their client and stuff, or it can be an Instagram account or whatever, but they always have like a social media platform to like communicate about the fishing business and the fish they sell. But right now, in terms of mobilizing the fishers and, for example, for this protest against big industrial trawlers, they have a crucial role, because they are the one actually communicating and mobilizing their husband, but also their clients about those issues. So yeah, in terms of finding solutions to the crisis and to sell the fish directly, or in terms of mobilizing fishers politically against the industrial sector, women had a crucial role in this crisis. Yeah, I mean, maybe there are questions, but that's more or less what I would say about it.
Thank you, Thibault. Do I pronounce you correctly?
Yeah,
Your
Thibault.
name correct? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Thibault, for sharing the stories on women current situation, especially during a crisis, and then also you shared the long journey of a political mobilization that done by women in France. Okay, now it's time for the real Q&A. Yeah, we still have a few minutes. We definitely have time to have that questions, and you are also welcome to type your question in a chat box, or you can have a direct spoken question. You're free to choose a chat box or direct question. Anyone?
Boleh, Mbak Moderator?
Ya, silahkan.
Baik, ya.
Jangan lupa nama, organisasi, terus
Baik.
sekarang base-nya di mana? Ya, thank you.
Baik, ya. Saya Arif Nasution dari Greenpeace. Base-nya sekarang di Banda Aceh, tapi officially kantor kita ada di Jakarta. Terima kasih untuk ibu-ibu dan juga teman-teman yang tadi sudah sempat sharing ya dari berbagai daerah. Aku pikir itu menggambarkan situasi terkini di Indonesia, dan juga tadi ada teman-teman dari Maldives ya menyampaikan. Jadi memang kalau kita lihat sih pantauan secara umum ini yang terjadi ya, tidak hanya di dunia di bagian selatan, tapi juga terjadi di ketimpangan itu juga terjadi jadi bisa terjadi dimanapun gitu, baik dia di negara maju atau negara manapun. Jadi aku pikir itu salah satu yang bisa kita tangkap dari sharing beberapa teman-teman. Nah, aku mau coba menanya, tadi mungkin ada dari teman-teman solidaritas perempuan ya, strategi untuk fokus, karena memang perubahan sistem sangat dibutuhkan. Semua instrumen sebenarnya negara, dalam hal ini Indonesia, sebenarnya juga udah menyiapkan ya, bahkan secara eksplisit ada beberapa institusi atau lembaga yang memang mengurusi bagaimana mainstreaming ya pendekatan gender dan juga penguatan pemberdayaan perempuan. Efektivitasnya memang tidak jalan. Jadi pertama mungkin dari beberapa riset yang dari 4 lokasi itu, apa sih strategi paling gitu yang mungkin kita bisa dorong sama-sama, karena aku juga dari call minggu lalu ya, dari Sidang Rakyat minggu lalu, itu juga menarik kalau memang ada komunika bersama yang bisa kita push bareng-bareng atau sama-sama. Mungkin itu untuk teman-teman SP supaya kita mungkin bisa dapat gambaran atau pilihan-pilihan strategi yang lebih efektif untuk walaupun kita tahu ya di kondisi pandemi seperti ini sepertinya mengharapkan negara hampir tidak mungkin, tapi harapan itu sebenarnya ada sepanjang kita bergerak. Jadi memang mungkin itu pesan yang mau kita coba sampaikan juga. Kalau analisis di teman-teman Greenpeace kita melihat sudah hopeless ya. Hopeless dalam arti bukan kita hopeless untuk bergerak, tapi hopeless untuk mengharapkan lebih banyak dari sistem yang sekarang sedang berjalan. Kita perlu ada revolusi sistem, bahkan secara damai perlu kita lakukan, dan mungkin dengan melihat strategi bagaimana memperkuat gerakan merakyat ya di level basis akan membantu revolusi sistem itu yang dilakukan secara damai. Mungkin itu, kembali ke Mbak Moderator dan kawan-kawan sekalian. Terima kasih.
Oke, teman SP siapa yang mau respon? Ari ya, silahkan langsung direspon Ari.
Oke, terima kasih Mas Arief karena sudah setia mengikuti Rembuk Rakyat Pesisir. Jadi memang SP mengadakan Rembuk Rakyat Pesisir persis seperti yang tadi disampaikan dalam pertanyaannya Mas Arief, bahwa situasi ini tidak hanya terjadi di Indonesia, di negara selatan, tapi di mana saja. Sehingga memang kesamaan atau keserupaan konteks ini yang kemudian bisa menjadi inspirasi kita membangun solidaritas yang lintas batas negara dan lainnya. Memang bacaan SP pun sama ya, kayaknya kita sudah sangat katakanlah hopeless, tapi ya nggak hopeless banget sih. Tapi memang sepertinya sudah saatnya kita berhenti untuk hanya menggantungkan nasib maupun perjuangan kita pada negara, gitu. Bagi SP hari ini, kenapa kemudian kami ingin mendorong atau membangun gerakan politik feminis? Memang gerakan politik yang didasarkan pada kesadaran akan situasi ketidakadilan yang dialami oleh perempuan di akar rumput, itu harus didorong pada perubahan sistem. Kita harus menunjukkan bahwa gerakan kolektif di kampung-kampung itu bagaimana kemudian perempuan-perempuan sampai ke tingkat terkecil itu punya pilihan politik, bahwa personal is political. Bagaimana perempuan itu bisa mengintervensi proses-proses pengambilan keputusan sampai di tingkat desa, bahkan sampai di tingkat keluarganya sendiri. Bagi kami itu proses yang sangat penting begitu. Dan yang kedua adalah ya penting juga selain menunjukkan kekuatan kolektif perempuan gitu kan, kekuatan kolektif perempuan sampai di tingkat desa, juga sebenarnya penting untuk membuat suara yang sangat ribut gitu. Dan sepertinya teman-teman Greenpeace juga kita tahu banyak kampanyenya yang sangat populer gitu. Menurutku makin banyak suara yang dibunyikan, terutama suara-suara perempuan dari akar rumput begitu, itu makin makin harapannya bisa makin mengganggu para pengambil kebijakan, karena memang dalam konteks ini yang dihadapi oleh gerakan perempuan ataupun gerakan feminis itu bukan hanya sekedar ekstraktivisme, pembangunan infrastruktur atau kapitalisme begitu, tapi juga sekaligus kita menghadapi yang namanya budaya patriarkis yang memang sangat mengakar. Itu tantangan yang menurut kami luar biasa besar dan memang butuh konsistensi gerak bersama gitu. Dan agenda ini tentunya bukan hanya agenda organisasi perempuan gitu, tapi juga adalah agenda bersama organisasi lingkungan, organisasi petani, organisasi nelayan, dan banyak organisasi lainnya gitu. Karena memang kita tahu persis bahwa perempuan itu adalah di jantung perlawanan gitu. Jadi kita dalam sejarah Indonesia juga kita tahu persis bagaimana kemudian gerakan perempuan itu selalu menjadi bagian dari gerakan sosial yang ada gitu. Jadi memang salah satu webinar atau Rembuk Rakyat Laut ini memang kami rencanakan selain membangun kolektivitas di Indonesia maupun lintas batas, ya memang sebagai proses untuk menyuarakan situasi perempuan, menyuarakan desakan perempuan, dan memang komunike yang nanti akan disampaikan atau dirumuskan di akhir rembuk rakyat pesisir ini akan menjadi desakan bersama, apa namanya, yang kami desakan gitu, yang kita semua desakan kepada para pihak, baik itu negara gitu maupun masyarakat secara luas, bagaimana kemudian perjuangan masyarakat pesisir untuk bisa menikmati atau bisa mendapatkan hak-haknya, di apa namanya, hak-haknya baik dia sebagai individu maupun sebagai bagian dari warga negara. Ya seperti itu.
Oke, makasih Ari. Ini juga ada pertanyaan dari Ibu Ati Murbaiti. Kalau keterangan riset SP itu ada di website SP nggak? Mungkin langsung dijawab Ari, mumpung mic-nya ada di Ari nih.
Ya Mbak Ati, sekarang sebenarnya masih dalam proses finalisasi. Nanti bisa kami kabari kalau memang sudah ada di website-nya SP.
Oke, makasih Ari. Ya, tadi aku juga echoing apa yang dibilang nih. Makasih sudah berbagi semangatnya. Ada pertanyaan klarifikasi lagi dari Ibu Ati. Tadi Ibu Darmawati atau Rahmawati. Terus juga what is affiliation of Tibalt Joes in this network? Jadi Ibu Darmawati atau Ibu Rahmawati, terus Tibalt Jost can explain to us what's your affiliation for this network. You can tell much more about that.
Yeah, as I wrote in the chat, my affiliation is Plein Mer, which is an organization of fishers and fish consumers working together for sustainable fishing. So yeah, it's in between a movement and an NGO, I would say. Is that the information you wanted, or do you need more details?
I think for right now it's enough, yeah. And yes, so you can continue to hear from our other comrades from other organization, such as Giacomo Kali from Bot-Ensa, Netherlands, Dalila Doman from Indonesian Center for Environmental Law, and Anirudh Sabangan from a Global Network for the Rights to Food and Nutrition. So you can share your perspective, your experience in mobilizing women in grassroots levels, and the stories on women fisher folks. Over to you, comrades. So, who do you want to be first?
Shall I say something then?
Yes, you can start. Yeah.
Okay. So thank you very much for this session. Congratulations. I see all the people of SP, of all the chapters. Ari is telling me so much about them, and now I see everybody with their fan. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Yeah, Martin, hi, how are you? So it's great to hear. I am very interested by the stories. Of course, I don't understand everything. I just want to make a small comment about, and also introduce next week intervention as well. I'm speaking from Amsterdam in the Netherlands, and the Netherlands has a water and maritime agenda around the world. They export of knowledge, of projects. And what is very interesting is that they're also very known to be a human rights champion and a women's rights champion. But somehow these two worlds operate in different parallel universum. So for example, the NCICD plan in Jakarta Bay, there was never a gender analysis of what would this project do to fisherfolk alone, and then in general, and then specifically to the women in the fisherfolk communities. And yet, the Netherlands is one of these champions of Sidang and all these other conventions. So it is also the work that you are currently doing in the communities of getting these stories out there that we can kind of push internationally to make these changes, that it's Saga, so that it's not these projects around the world, these infrastructure projects do not operate gender blind anymore. We really need that, and for that I really congratulate you with your work, and I welcome it a lot, and please share more and more. We really need that. And just to introduce, next week we have the last series of this, the last episode of this webinar series, and I will also share a little bit more about how the Netherlands works around the world with a water and maritime agenda, and also explain our work together with organizations like SP, and also our friends in Philippines, and now also in Maldives and around the world. So I hope to see you all then. And for now, I'll stop and listen more. Thank you very much.
So when's exactly next week?
Same day, same time, right, Martin?
Okay. Clear. Okay, so the invitation will be sent out by Martin, right? Okay.
Yeah,
by Solidaritas
23rd
Perempuan.
September. Because at 24 we celebrate National Agrarian Days. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Gyokombo, for your sharing. So we move to Ibu Dalila Doman. Ibu Dalila Doman, please share your experience, your expertise, your comments based on the presentation that we already heard and got.
Terima kasih moderator untuk kesempatannya. Kalau terkait spesifik perempuan, saya belum banyak perspektif ya. Namun yang saya sedikit banyak tahu itu memang masyarakat pesisir banyak terdampak dari adanya pembangunan reklamasi salah satunya, dan juga karena adanya pandemi ini. Beberapa waktu lalu saya lupa organisasi swadaya masyarakat apa, tapi sudah ada penelitian di lapangan bahwa memang banyak juga perempuan nelayan yang tidak mendapatkan bantuan, kalau nggak salah di daerah Jawa Tengah, yang mana sebetulnya mereka berhak untuk mendapatkan bantuan sama halnya dengan nelayan laki-laki. Selain itu, kita perlu antisipasi beberapa peraturan-peraturan yang muncul saat pandemi ini yang banyak merugikan masyarakat perikanan, seperti peraturan menteri terkait ekspor lobster itu ya. Itu saya yakin walaupun belum ada yang mempublikasikan dengan spesifik, pasti akan membawa dampak terhadap perempuan nelayan. Karena itu mempengaruhi keberadaan peraturan tersebut lebih pada pihak eksportir atau pemain-pemain besar, biasanya disebutkan di publikasi sebagai pemain-pemain besar. Mungkin segitu aja dari saya. Terima kasih moderator.
Oke, terima kasih Ibu Dalila sudah sharing ya. Ini bisa jadi memperkaya ini kita fokus advokasi kita juga ke depan gitu. So we can focus on other or alternatives of commodities and seafood industries. So and then regarding the situation in Indonesia, and now we move to Ani Sabangan from Global Network for the Right to Food and Nutrition. So please share your perspective or your advocacy experience related to this.
Yes, hi. I'm not prepared for this. Okay, I come from the Philippines. I've just started working for the Global Network for the Right to Food. As Sifang of Fian is a member, Solidaritas Perempuan is a member. I worked as a journalist previously for the mainstream media, but you know there are many limitations in the mainstream media here in the Philippines. So I've decided to go back to my first love, and that is, writing stories about people and their plight. So I'm very overwhelmed. No, it's very empowering. What you've said, everything here. I wish I could write it. This is among my assignments with GNRTFN, the Global Network for the Right to Food. So I'm like a journalist here covering the webinar. And after the third webinar, we hope to come out to publish a story about this event, and then we're going to upload this on the GNRTFN website and push this on social media. So my assignment is primarily in Asia. So I welcome that you send us an invitation whenever you have any activities, campaigns, webinar, talks, and maybe research or press statement, so we can have this written and promoted on the GNRTFN website. So please, we encourage, if you know the website, Ari knows my email, and then Ari also knows the website of the website and the email of WeFang and GNRTFN. So whatever you want us to write about, and then to promote on social media, that's my that's my work now with GNRTFN. So I hope we would be able to write a story based on this. And then we promote it to the other members of the network. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much for your opportunity that you also want to encourage us to share our stories in the website, and then to leveling up the campaign, right? So from the communities to the regional level, and then and we are expecting to like in the international level too. I think it's gonna be homework for Solidaritas Perempuan and also other organization in here, and Mbak Ati, you also have question that maybe do you want, so anyone want to respond for that, Ari? So since when the minister started to give attention, the minister, I mean Ibu Susi, start to give attention for ensuring women, fisher women, to get the fisher card, user ID card. So where's the challenges, and then maybe she also assumed there are many women who couldn't afford, who couldn't access to have that card.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Andy and Ari.
Hi, thank you, AR. Great to have you here. Oke. Terkait dengan kartu nelayan, sebetulnya memang SP sendiri bersama dengan teman-teman di komunitas itu berusaha untuk mencoba membantu kawan-kawan perempuan nelayan agar bisa mendapatkan kartu nelayan. Itu prosesnya sudah dimulai memang sejak Kementerian Kelautan Perikanan itu masih dijabat oleh Ibu Susi Pujiastuti. Tapi memang kendalanya itu adalah ya terkait dengan definisi nelayan itu sendiri, di mana Dinas Kelautan dan Perikanan di masing-masing wilayah, setidaknya di 4 wilayah komunitas SP itu masih melihat bahwa nelayan ya memang adalah orang yang pergi ke tengah laut untuk mencari ikan, begitu. Sehingga sementara pada faktanya perempuan yang kami mohonkan untuk kartu nelayan itu adalah sebagian besarnya perempuan pengolah ikan begitu. Sehingga banyak di antara atau memang kami lebih banyak dan bahkan setahu saya mungkin ini juga bisa diklarifikasi oleh teman-teman di komunitas, belum ada yang berhasil untuk mendapatkan kartu nelayan tersebut gitu. Jadi memang kemudian yang pada akhirnya dilihat sebagai istri nelayan saja begitu, sehingga tidak mendapatkan pengakuan sebagai nelayan. Seperti itu situasinya kalau yang dialami oleh teman-teman SP.
Terima kasih banyak, Ari. Terima kasih
Ya,
banyak.
Mbak.
Iya. Boleh sekalian sambung pertanyaan, boleh?
Gimana, Andi? Oke lah ya.
Ya, oke. Kalian kalau boleh sambung ini menjelang pilkada, ibu-ibu bagaimana? Apakah sudah rencana mendesakkan berbagai macam desakan kepada calon-calon, walaupun mereka masih bakal calon ya, tapi apakah kampanye keperluan perempuan nelayan ini sudah direncanakan menjelang pilkada ini, sudah dekat waktunya? Walaupun banyak permintaan untuk menunda, tapi sepertinya akan tetap berlangsung Desember sehingga kampanyenya ini sebentar lagi. Apakah para komunitas SP sudah menyiapkan agenda untuk mendesak para calon memperhatikan keperluan perempuan, khususnya perempuan nelayan? Terima kasih.
Oke, pertanyaannya Mbak Ati pas banget ya, karena kebetulan 3 komunitas yang hadir hari ini, Lampung, Kendari, dan juga Makassar itu akan menghadapi pilkada di tahun ini. Ya, memang secara nasional kita punya agenda politik perempuan. Jadi beberapa agenda yang sebenarnya juga ini kita suarakan ketika Pilpres yang lalu gitu. Agenda politik perempuan ini memuat kepentingan-kepentingan perempuan yang memang harus menjadi agenda bagi para politisi yang akan bertarung di pilkada yang akan datang begitu. Nah, tentunya agenda politik perempuan ini adalah agenda yang disarikan dari proses diskusi dengan perempuan-perempuan akar rumput melalui diskusi-diskusi kampung. Apa yang menjadi penting, apa kemudian yang menjadi desakan, dan hal-hal apa yang perlu diubah dari segi sistem kebijakan dan lain-lainnya gitu, kemudian disarikan dalam agenda politik perempuan ini. Dan sekaligus ketika kami mencoba menggali, kami juga melakukan pendidikan politik kepada perempuan nelayan, perempuan pesisir, dan perempuan marginal lainnya, bahwa yang penting adalah dari proses politik yang berlangsung itu adalah bagaimana suara kepentingan perempuan itu menjadi agenda pemimpin di daerah, tidak hanya menjelang kontestasi politik begitu, tapi juga setelah dan berikutnya sampai kemudian terpenuhinya hak-hak perempuan. Seperti itu. Jadi kita meminta agar ya walaupun sebelum pemilu ya kita memang memantau gitu. Kemudian setelah pemilu ya kita kembali memantau gitu. Apakah kemudian agenda yang berjalan itu sudah mengarah pada pemenuhan hak perempuan atau justru semakin menghilangkan kedaulatan perempuan, menghilangkan ruang-ruang bagi masyarakat sipil untuk mengkritisi negara dan lain sebagainya. Kalau misalnya teman-teman komunitas lain dari Lampung, Kendari ataupun Makassar ada yang mau menambahkan, dipersilahkan.
Ya, teman-teman dari komunitas ada yang mau merespon? Menambahkan apa yang sudah dijelaskan oleh Ari. Gak ada? So,
Okay.
there is no response yet, so that's okay. Okay. Yeah, but
Gak apa-apa, dipikir dulu gak apa-apa.
yeah. So if you want to, if you already something in mind, SP Angin Mamiri, SP Kendari, SP Setai, just jump in, yeah. Just jump in the conversation. So yeah, but Ari, because we also want to hear the final thoughts from the panelists. Maybe you can start with Ari.
Oke. Jadi dari apa yang disampaikan oleh teman-teman, baik di komunitas SP juga maupun jaringan di regional dan global, kita sadari betul bahwa saat ini kita masih berhadapan dengan krisis, tidak cuma ancaman terhadap kesehatan kita, tapi juga ancaman terhadap sistem ekonomi, politik, maupun dimensi kehidupan lainnya. Dan krisis ini masih terus terjadi, masih terus berlangsung, bahkan di Indonesia juga mungkin di beberapa belahan dunia lainnya itu semakin memburuk. Nah, sebetulnya pada masa seperti ini ya, kita harusnya sadar bahwa kita sangat tergantung pada para penyedia pangan, khususnya nelayan tradisional yang sudah menyediakan pangan bagi masyarakat di dunia. Tapi kita juga lihat bagaimana kemudian banyak penguasa negara-negara gitu tetap berpegang teguh pada investasi, begitu. Kemudian pertumbuhan ekonomi seolah-olah meyakini bahwa benar-benar terjadi yang namanya trickle down effect, padahal enggak. Jadi sama sekali enggak ada tetesan itu. Dan mirisnya memang bagaimana kemudian investasi yang menggusur, meminggirkan nelayan dan masyarakat pesisir itu terus terjadi. Padahal kita sama-sama tahu bahwa kita sebagai nelayan, kita sebagai masyarakat pesisir, keinginannya sangat sederhana. Bagaimana kita bisa tetap pergi melaut, bagaimana kita bisa tetap menghidupi keluarga kita, bagaimana kita bisa tetap menjaga identitas kita sebagai nelayan, sebagai masyarakat bahari. Keinginan kita sangat sederhana bahwa kita hanya ingin punya lingkungan yang bersih, lingkungan yang sehat, tapi kemudian aktivitas korporasi besar yang kemudian bekerja sama dengan sistem negara yang otoritarian, kemudian bekerja sama dengan pendekatan-pendekatan militerisme, itu semakin membuat kita terus menyempit ruang hidupnya, semakin membuat kita sesak nafasnya. Maka ruang ini, rembuk rakyat laut ini adalah ruang di mana kita semua, masyarakat pesisir, perempuan dan laki-laki, kita bisa mendiskusikan situasi yang dialami. Bagaimana kita membangun solidaritas warga yang melampaui lintas negara. Hari ini bukan hari terakhir, kita masih ada satu sesi lagi, berharap juga teman-teman masih bisa mengikuti proses diskusinya, dan kita sama-sama mempunyai agenda untuk kita bisa desakkan kepada para pengambil keputusan agar lebih mendengarkan suara-suara yang selama ini samar atau disamarkan. Terima kasih untuk kehadiran semua. Hidup perempuan, hidup nelayan.
Hidup nelayan.
Hidup perempuan, hidup nelayan.
Okay, so we can continue to Aisat Lusat to share your final thought on or comment or respond from any women's stories that we heard. Is Aisat there?
I think she's already left. Aisha, oh yeah, she's already left.
Okay, so yeah, we can right away go to Zoe. Zoe, can share your final thought?
Sure, thanks. Sorry, my camera is not working. So it's been quite a pleasure and a privilege to hear from all of these different parts of the world and listen to the experiences of many fisher women and people working on these issues, especially during this particularly difficult global pandemic moment. And I think what has been demonstrated clearly in many of the responses is that in many fishing communities, it's the women who are keeping things going, who are sustaining the lives of their families and of their communities, and supporting their friends and their political activism and their children in these very difficult times. But I think that the COVID moment has also made incredibly clear and sort of forced us to think deeply about what is really the essential life-sustaining work that is what are essential workers, who are they, and what are the crucial and most important jobs and activities that in fishing communities, and many of them are the ones that are currently not valued: the care work, the social reproductive work, the food providing in communities all over the world. So I think that it's a difficult moment, but also an opportunity to try to shift the debate around how we can push for structural change that actually values these life-sustaining activities that are the center of fishing communities that women are doing, and how we can make systemic changes in order to provide a bit more support for that work. So at TNI, we've been trying to sort of, our role is primarily kind of research and supporting of social movements. So we have been trying to visibilize what this moment looks like on the ground for fishing communities. So we're engaged in a series of interviews among fishers all over the world about what this moment has brought to them and what strategies they are using to survive and to make those changes that I highlighted as necessary. Something that I find quite inspiring, especially led by women in many cases, is the building of alliances among sort of essential workers and food providers. So I've seen in a number of cases in Ecuador, for example, also in Indonesia, I have been told that it's happening, where peasant women and fisher women are connecting to exchange food and build more localized, more secure food access for their local communities. The alliances that are developing between food eaters and fishers that Thibaut described in France, I think a lot of the sort of broadening out of alliances between the workers and the people who have been most marginalized by the patriarchal capitalist system are in a strategic position to connect and push for change. And I think I'm quite inspired after the conversation today, because I see much of that is already being built and happening. We've learned some really useful tools and human rights instruments from Yifang's presentation, for example, that can support and push those struggles further. But yeah, I am leaving this call quite inspired by the leadership of fisher women to build those alliances and push for that systemic change, so that the life-sustaining activities that they are engaged in will be more valued and supported. So thank you to all the comments and presenters.
Thank you, Zoe. So now we're moving to Ivan. Ivan, please share your final thoughts. Ivan, where are you?
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, sorry. Okay. I think a lot has already been said by Ari and Zoe, so I'm not going to repeat, but I think for me it was very encouraging, the stories that were shared by women, and very inspiring indeed. I wanted to just make a final comment in saying that, of course, in my presentation today, I focus a lot on what you can do at the international level, but I do believe the human rights system as it stands right now does have its weaknesses, and I think we need to really strengthen the local and the national. In many countries, you have, for example, the right to food also enshrined in your own, national constitution. So I really believe the key is to strengthen at the national and local level and to build, alliances, continue pushing for the governments to do what they're supposed to do and realize and implement all the rights that they have basically promised in their constitution. So yeah, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Yvonne. Thank you for all panelists for giving your final thoughts. So as a moderator, let me share my notes too, resulted from the discussion. So yeah, first we heard the stories from fisher women in different areas in Indonesia, and then also the situation occurring in Maldives and then also in France. And then we also get the gender stereotyping and male breadwinner bias still become mindset of a state apparatus or decision maker, or those and then those apparatus influence and imply how they run the decision-making process as well as the development process. And also several advocacy work against the infrastructure projects that harm to women have been ongoing from women in collective level, from a local to build the movement to the international level. And then they want to ensure that they have climate resilience, but also they want to protect their rights from natural resources grabbing, including their land. And then also we also getting know the three problems areas which important to zoom in. The first is natural resources grabbing, unjust food economies, and also exploitative and invisible labor. We also heard that women's ways like being invisible, like treated as invisible in the work in terms of fisheries. And then and then also we got a new perspective, how labor rights perspective enrich our analysis to understand women in coastal communities, and then also how the importance on women leadership, alliance building in their struggle to get their rights as a fisherwoman. One alternative to propose, I heard also, is ensuring women in fisheries have equal share, have equal benefit, less harm, and then make them less vulnerable in the global fisheries supply chain. And then also we also get the food as right. This is the core value, the core ideological value. So start from the food as right, we can know that why women are very vulnerable in the hunger situation in regards to rights to food. So we also get the rights to food realization can happen if women live freely from any violence or any discrimination. So also like putting nutrition as the core, and then also right to food cannot be understood partially from the interconnected to other human rights. And then also we also getting know about the four dimensions of a right to food as the international human instrument: affordability, availability, accessibility, and sustainability, where the states are required to respect, protect, and fulfill all of the rights to food for the fisher women. And then also we heard the detailed cases where states denied their obligation to ensure women in the fisheries and coastal communities can enjoy their rights together with the other rights, what they should get as a traditional fisherwoman. So lastly, we also get that our movement alliance from local and to global is also possible, yeah, to build, to share our struggle. So that's all my notes. So before we close this session, I want to invite Nisa, the head of National Executive Body from Solidaritas Perempuan, to have the closing statement. Over to you, Nisa.
Ya, halo teman-teman. Aku pakai bahasa Indonesia aja ya Kak ya. Mudah-mudahan teman-teman yang dari luar negeri bisa bisa diterjemahkan. Terima kasih banyak kawan-kawan yang sudah bergabung, teman-teman narasumber, teman-teman juga kawan-kawan dari SP Angin Mamiri, dari Lampung, dari Kendari, yang sudah berbagi juga, dan tadi ada banyak input sebenarnya dari teman-teman jaringan yang lain. Terima kasih banyak pertanyaan-pertanyaannya maupun juga sharingnya. Jangan lupa ini adalah rangkaian kedua. Di rangkaian ketiga nanti kita juga akan bicara soal infrastruktur raksasa, terus kemudian investasi dan otoritarianisme, dan bagaimana selama ini masyarakat pesisir juga bergelut menghadapi hal tersebut. Sekali lagi terima kasih kawan-kawan, dan semoga juga apa yang sudah di-sharing hari ini itu bisa kita lanjutkan dengan perjuangan ke depan. Mengutip kata Ari tadi, bahwa yang penting sekarang adalah bagaimana memperkuat perjuangan-perjuangan warga, membangun gerakan warga untuk kemudian kita bisa berdaulat dan juga bisa merebut hak-hak kita. Terima kasih, selamat sore.
Terima kasih Caca. Oke, terima kasih Caca atas closing statement-nya. Baik kawan-kawan, teman-teman, so friends, comrades, please open your video on. So we want to take a picture together. Yeah, I think Martin can screenshot of us. So Martin, do you want to jump it and then instruct us like 3, 2, 1, and then we got ready?
Ya. Sudah bisa dibuka semua videonya? Oke, kalau gitu saya akan screen capture. Gimana ya? Hidup perempuan. Hidup perempuan. Oke, terima kasih.
Thank you, Martin. So yeah, all of the materials will be shared to you. The organization will be emailing after this. Our time is up. Let's build the solidarity after this. It was my great honor and pleasure to have been a moderator for this session. First of all, I would like to thank all the panelists, Ariska, Aitza, Zoe, and Yubang, and then also all of the SP communities, all of the organizations who already contribute and participate with us. And finally, thank you for Solidaritas Perempuan for organizing this amazing session. I hope you enjoyed and got inspired by this session. Take care and stay safe. Goodbye, and see you in next week in a same session with the Rembuk Rakyat Pesisir. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih kepada interpreter, Mas Belly.
Ya.
Tanpa penerjemahan tidak akan ada revolusi.
Jajah penerjemah juga revolusi, betul Martin.
Indonesia nih dulu. Terima kasih semua.
Thank you very much.